Welcome, young wizard, to a tale of extraordinary wonder and unshakable authenticity. Tonight, we follow the remarkable life of Luna Lovegood, a girl whose dreamy eyes saw magic where others saw madness, whose gentle heart found friendship in the most unlikely places, and whose unwavering belief in the impossible made the impossible seem wonderfully real. As you settle into your cozy bed, let these words carry you through the life of perhaps the most genuinely magical soul Hogwarts ever knew. Close your eyes and drift into this chronicle of dancing to different music, where being different was not just accepted but celebrated, and where the strangest truths often proved to be the most beautiful. In the rolling countryside of Devon, where ancient magic flows through meadow and stream, there stood a house that looked as though it might have grown from the earth itself rather than been built by human hands. The Lovegood home rose like a peculiar black cylinder against the gentle hills of Ottery Street. Catchpole, its rooms stacked atop one another in defiance of conventional architecture, its windows scattered across its surface like stars flung carelessly across a midnight sky. This was not a house built for impressing neighbors or conforming to expectations, but a dwelling that reflected the unique souls who called it home, a family that had always marched to the rhythm of their own invisible drum. It was into this world of wonder and whimsy that Luna Lovegood was born on a February morning in 1981, when frost painted delicate patterns on the windows and the air itself seemed to shimmer with possibility. Even as a baby, there was something ethereal about her, something that suggested she existed slightly apart from the ordinary world, as if she could see things that remained hidden from less perceptive eyes. Her parents, Xenophilius and Pandora Lovegood, recognized this quality immediately and nurtured it with the kind of loving acceptance that allowed unusual flowers to bloom in their own time and their own way. Xenophilius Lovegood was a man whose imagination knew no boundaries and whose curiosity about the magical world's mysteries had made him something of a legend among those who appreciated unconventional thinking. As editor and publisher of The Quibbler, a magazine dedicated to exploring the unexplained and celebrating the impossible, he had built his life around the principle that truth often wore the most unlikely disguises. His publication featured stories that made other magical journalists shake their heads in bewilderment. Detailed investigations into the existence of crumplehorn snorkax, theoretical discussions about the possibility that Sirius Black was actually a well-known wizard rock star living in disguise, and passionate arguments for the reality of creatures that most wizards dismissed as pure fantasy. But Xenophilius was not a fool living in a world of delusion. He was a man who understood that the magical world contained wonders that defied easy categorization, that the line between possible and impossible was far thinner than most people believed. His approach to journalism was rooted in the conviction that dismissing something as impossible simply because it had never been proven was the surest way to miss the most remarkable discoveries. This philosophy shaped not just his professional work, but his entire approach to life, creating an atmosphere in the Lovegood household where questions were more valued than answers, and where wonder was considered the highest form of wisdom. The influence of Xenophilius on his daughter's developing worldview cannot be overstated. From her earliest years, Luna was surrounded by conversations about magical creatures that existed just beyond the edge of common knowledge. Discussions of conspiracy theories that might contain kernels of profound truth, and debates about the nature of reality itself that would have challenged philosophers and theoreticians at the highest levels. Where other children learned to accept the world as it appeared to be, Luna learned to question everything and to remain open to possibilities that others might find too strange to consider seriously. But it was her mother, Pandora Lovegood, who provided the practical foundation for Luna's unique perspective on magic and life. Pandora was an experimental spell creator whose work pushed the boundaries of what magic could accomplish. and whose innovations often challenged conventional understanding of how spells should work. She approached magic not as a rigid system of rules to be followed, but as a creative medium to be explored, understanding that the most significant breakthroughs often came from attempting things that traditional magical theory suggested were impossible. The Lovegood family lived on the outskirts of the village, their peculiar house nestled among gentle hills and fertile meadows that seemed to pulse with their own ancient magic. The location was not accidental but carefully chosen, as Xenophilius had identified the area as a convergence point for several ley lines that enhanced magical experimentation and attracted unusual creatures. Their nearest neighbours included the Weasley family, whose burrow stood like a cheerful monument to organised chaos, the Diggories, whose well-maintained property reflected their more conventional approach to magical living, and the Fawcetts, whose quiet competence had made them valued members of the local magical community for generations. Young Luna grew up in this environment of controlled eccentricity and loving acceptance, learning from the earliest age that being different was not just acceptable but valuable. Her childhood was filled with expeditions to search for creatures that might or might not exist, experiments with spells that had never been attempted before, and long conversations about the nature of truth and the importance of maintaining an open mind in the face of skepticism from those who lacked the imagination to see beyond conventional limitations. The house itself was a wonderland of magical innovation and creative chaos. Each room had been designed to serve multiple purposes and to accommodate experiments that required unusual spatial arrangements. The kitchen contained not just conventional cooking equipment, but also specialized cauldrons for brewing experimental potions and magical instruments for testing the properties of unusual ingredients. The library was filled with books that most magical families would have considered too dangerous or too strange for household reading. Volumes that explored theoretical magic, investigated mysterious creatures, and documented unexplained phenomena that challenged accepted understanding of how the magical world operated. Luna's bedroom was a perfect reflection of her developing personality, a space that combined childish wonder with sophisticated understanding of magical theory. The walls were covered with drawings of creatures that she hoped to encounter someday, maps of places where unusual magical phenomena had been reported, and charts tracking the movements of celestial bodies that might influence spellcasting and creature behavior. Her collection of unusual objects, gathered during family expeditions and magical experiments, occupied shelves and surfaces throughout the room, each item carefully labeled with notes about where it had been found and what unusual properties it might possess. But perhaps the most important aspect of Luna's early education was the way her parents taught her to approach the unknown with courage rather than fear. Where other magical families might have warned their children about the dangers of exploring beyond safe boundaries, the Lovegoods encouraged curiosity and rewarded brave investigations into mysterious phenomena. They understood that fear of the unknown was the enemy of discovery, and that protecting children from all potential dangers was less important than teaching them to navigate uncertainty with wisdom and courage. This approach to child-rearing produced a little girl who was utterly fearless in her pursuit of understanding and completely comfortable with ambiguity and mystery. Luna learned early that not all questions had immediate answers, and that the most interesting discoveries often came from following seemingly impossible leads to their logical conclusions. She developed an intuitive understanding of magic that went beyond spellcasting and potion brewing to encompass the deeper patterns that connected all magical phenomena, the underlying harmonies that most wizards never learned to hear. Her relationship with her parents was built on mutual respect and genuine friendship rather than the authoritarian dynamics that characterized many magical families. Xenophilius and Pandora treated Luna as an intellectual equal, whose observations and insights were valuable contributions to their ongoing investigations rather than childish fantasies to be dismissed or discouraged. This approach fostered in Luna a confidence in her own perceptions and a willingness to trust her instincts even when they contradicted conventional wisdom or popular opinion. The magical creatures that the family sought during their expeditions became more than research subjects for Luna. They were potential friends, whose existence she never doubted despite the skepticism of others. She learned the theoretical habitats and behavioral patterns of dozens of species that most wizards considered mythical, developing an encyclopedic knowledge of creatures that existed just beyond the edge of documented magical zoology. More importantly, she learned to approach these creatures with respect and wonder, rather than the desire to capture or control that motivated many magical naturalists. But the foundation of Luna's character was not built solely through academic learning and creature hunting expeditions. The Lovegood household was filled with music and laughter, with creative projects that had no purpose beyond the joy of creation, and with quiet moments of connection that reinforced the bonds of love and understanding between family members. Luna learned that life was meant to be celebrated as well as studied, that wonder was as important as knowledge, and that the relationships between people were the most magical phenomena of all. The tragic event that would reshape Luna's understanding of life and death came without warning on what had started as an ordinary morning in late spring, when she was 9 years old and still young enough to believe that her parents' love could protect her from any real harm. Pandora had been working on an experimental spell in her private laboratory, a magical innovation that she hoped would revolutionize the way wizards understood the relationship between intention and magical effect. The spell was complex and ambitious, requiring precise control of magical energy and perfect timing of multiple components that had never been combined in quite this way before. Luna was in the garden when the explosion occurred, searching for signs of bowtruckle activity in the apple trees that grew near the house. The sound was unlike anything she had ever heard, not the sharp crack of a spell going wrong, but a deep, resonant tone that seemed to come from the earth itself, as if reality had been struck like an enormous bell. The magical energy released by the failed experiment washed over the property in waves that made the air shimmer and caused every living thing to pause in recognition of something momentous and terrible occurring. She ran toward the house without conscious thought, her young mind unable to process what her magical senses were telling her about the nature of the disaster unfolding. The laboratory where her mother had been working was simply gone, not destroyed but erased, as if the spell had created a pocket of non-existence that had consumed everything within its radius. Pandora Lovegood had vanished as completely as if she had never existed, leaving behind only empty space, where moments before there had been a brilliant mind working to expand the boundaries of magical possibility. The sight of that absence, that perfectly circular void where her mother's workshop and her mother herself had been, burned itself into Luna's memory with the kind of clarity that trauma sometimes creates. But even more profound than the visual impact was the magical emptiness that surrounded the space, a silence so complete that it seemed to swallow sound itself. Luna stood at the edge of that terrible emptiness and understood with the crystal certainty that sometimes comes to children in moments of supreme crisis that her mother was gone forever, that no amount of wishing or hoping or believing would bring her back. Xenophilius found his daughter standing motionless at the edge of the void, her pale eyes fixed on something that existed beyond the visible world. When he gathered her into his arms, she didn't cry or rage against the unfairness of what had happened. Instead, she looked up at him with an expression of profound sadness mixed with something that might have been acceptance, and said quietly, "Mummy's gone exploring somewhere we can't follow yet, isn't she, Daddy?" her ability to find a framework for understanding even this ultimate loss, to place it within a larger context that made emotional sense, revealed the depth of wisdom that already existed within her young soul. The funeral service for Pandora Lovegood was unlike any that the magical community of Ottery Street Catchpole had ever witnessed. Instead of focusing on grief and loss, Xenophilius chose to celebrate his wife's dedication to discovery and her refusal to be limited by conventional thinking about what was possible. The service became a testament to the value of curiosity and the importance of pursuing knowledge even when that pursuit involved significant risks. Luna listened to the eulogies with the same dreamy attention she gave to everything else, as if she were filing away information that she would need to understand later when she was older and wiser. In the weeks following her mother's death, Luna began displaying behaviors that concerned some adults, but which Xenophilius recognized as her unique way of processing grief and maintaining connection with Pandora's memory. She started conversations with empty air as if someone invisible were listening, created elaborate drawings of places that existed only in her imagination, and spent hours staring at the sky, as if she were watching for signs of her mother's presence in the movement of clouds and birds. But the most significant change was in Luna's relationship with the concept of death itself. Where other children might have developed fears about mortality and separation, Luna seemed to gain a deeper understanding of the continuity that connected all living things. She began speaking about death not as an ending, but as a transition to a different form of existence, one that was invisible to ordinary perception, but no less real for being unseen. This perspective would later influence her ability to see thestrals and hear voices beyond the veil in the Department of Mysteries, but it began as a 9-year-old girl's attempt to make sense of losing the most important person in her young life. The photograph that Luna kept on her bedside table, showing herself and Pandora embracing in the garden behind their unusual house, became more than a memorial, but a daily reminder of the love that had shaped her earliest years. She would speak to the photograph sometimes, sharing discoveries and questions and moments of wonder as if her mother could still hear and respond. This practice might have seemed unhealthy to outside observers, but it served an important function in helping Luna maintain her connection to the values and perspectives that Pandora had instilled in her. The months following the tragedy also revealed the strength of the bond between father and daughter, as Xenophilius and Luna learned to navigate their changed world together. Rather than becoming overprotective or allowing grief to dominate their lives, they chose to honor Pandora's memory by continuing her work and maintaining their commitment to exploring the mysteries that she had found so compelling. Their expeditions in search of unusual creatures became more frequent and more adventurous, as if they were determined to prove that loss could not diminish their capacity for wonder. Luna's understanding of magic evolved during this period as well, moving beyond the theoretical knowledge she had gained from books and conversations to encompass a more intuitive appreciation for the forces that connected all living things. She began to display abilities that suggested unusual magical sensitivity, predicting weather changes days in advance, sensing the emotional states of animals, and occasionally people, and identifying magical objects and locations through means that she could never quite explain in conventional terms. The combination of intellectual curiosity inherited from both parents, practical magical knowledge gained through years of experimentation, and the deeper wisdom that sometimes comes from experiencing profound loss had created in Luna a unique perspective on the magical world and her place within it. She was no longer simply the dreamy daughter of eccentric parents, but an individual whose unusual insights and abilities marked her as someone destined for a role that conventional education could never have prepared her for. As her 11th birthday approached, and the inevitability of Hogwarts attendance became a topic of daily conversation, Luna faced the prospect of leaving her familiar world with characteristic equanimity. She understood that school would expose her to ideas and people who might not appreciate her unique perspective, but she also looked forward to the opportunity to learn from professors whose knowledge exceeded even her parents' considerable expertise. More importantly, she sensed that Hogwarts would provide her with opportunities to help others in ways that her current life, however fulfilling, could not offer. The letter from Hogwarts, when it finally arrived on a warm July morning, was delivered not by the usual school owl, but by a magnificent tawny owl that Luna immediately recognized as one of the descendants of the famous Hogwarts flock. The bird landed on the kitchen table where she and Xenophilius were sharing breakfast and examining the latest batch of reader letters to the Quibbler, extending its leg with the kind of dignity that suggested it understood the importance of its mission. Luna opened the letter with hands that trembled slightly, not from nervousness but from excitement at this concrete proof that her childhood was ending and her adult adventures were about to begin. The acceptance letter was written in the traditional format that had been used for centuries, but to Luna, it read like an invitation to explore mysteries that even her unconventional education had only hinted at. Hogwarts represented not just formal magical training, but access to libraries filled with books she had never seen, professors whose specialties covered areas of magic that even Xenophilius had never investigated, and most intriguingly, other students whose own unique perspectives might complement or challenge her own. The weeks of preparation for her departure were filled with shopping trips to Diagon Alley that became adventures in their own right, as Luna approached each required purchase as an opportunity to learn something new about the magical world's customs and expectations. Her school robes were selected with care, her cauldron chosen for both practical function and aesthetic appeal, and her wand, when she finally found it at Ollivander's, seemed to recognize her immediately, producing a shower of silver sparks that made the elderly wandmaker nod with satisfaction and mutter something about unusual destinations, requiring unusual guides. But perhaps the most important preparation was emotional rather than material, as Luna spent her final weeks at home absorbing the lessons that her unique upbringing had taught her, and preparing to share those insights with a world that might not initially understand or appreciate them. She practiced maintaining her sense of wonder in the face of skepticism, her commitment to truth in environments where conformity was rewarded, and her capacity for friendship with people who might seem very different from herself on the surface, but who shared her fundamental desire to understand and explore the magical world's infinite possibilities. The night before her departure for Hogwarts, Luna stood in her childhood bedroom and took inventory of the person she had become through 9 years of loving guidance, intellectual challenge, and profound loss. She was no longer the baby who had been born into a world of controlled chaos and unlimited possibility, but neither was she yet the young woman who would eventually help save the magical world through her courage and insight. She was something in between, a girl on the threshold of adventure, carrying within herself all the tools she would need to navigate whatever challenges and opportunities lay ahead, armed with curiosity as her weapon and wonder as her shield. Tomorrow would bring the Hogwarts Express, the Sorting Hat, and her first taste of life away from the protective embrace of her father's unconventional wisdom. But tonight, she was still Luna Lovegood of Ottery Street, catchpole, daughter of Xenophilius and Pandora, future naturalist and defender of impossible things, ready to begin the next chapter of a story that would prove stranger and more wonderful than even her imagination had dared to hope. The September morning that would forever change Luna Lovegood's understanding of belonging dawned grey and misty over King's Cross Station, where the boundary between the magical and mundane worlds blurred in ways that seemed particularly appropriate for someone whose entire life had been spent navigating the spaces between conventional reality and extraordinary possibility. Standing beside her father on platform 9 3/4, Surrounded by families saying goodbye to children who were embarking on their own journeys of discovery, Luna felt the weight of transition settling around her like a familiar cloak. The Hogwarts Express stood before them, like a crimson promise, its brass fittings gleaming. Despite the early morning fog, and its windows already beginning to fill with the faces of students who were returning to a world that Luna knew only through stories and imagination. The locomotive represented more than mere transportation, but a bridge between the life she had always known and the adventures that awaited her in a castle filled with centuries of accumulated wisdom and mystery. For someone who had spent her childhood exploring the edges of the magical world, the train offered passage to its very heart. Xenophilius helped her load her trunk onto the train with the same careful attention he brought to everything involving his daughter's welfare. But Luna could see in his pale eyes the mixture of pride and worry that marked this moment as a beginning and an ending simultaneously. They had been companions in wonder for 11 years, sharing expeditions and experiments and quiet conversations that had shaped her understanding of what it meant to live an authentic life in a world that often rewarded conformity over creativity. Now she would be joining a community where his influence could not protect her from the judgments and expectations of peers who had been raised with very different values. "Remember, Luna," he said as they stood together beside the train, his voice carrying the weight of all the lessons he had tried to impart during their years together. "The most important discoveries are made by those brave enough to look where others refuse to see. Don't let anyone convince you that your perspective is less valid simply because it's different from theirs." His words were both encouragement and warning, acknowledging that the path ahead would require courage of a kind that even their unconventional household had not fully prepared her for. Luna nodded with the serene acceptance that had become her trademark response to life's challenges and opportunities, understanding that her father's wisdom would remain with her even when his physical presence could not. She had learned from both parents that love was not possessive but liberating, that caring for someone meant preparing them for independence rather than creating dependency. The lessons of her childhood had been designed not to keep her safely contained within familiar boundaries, but to equip her for adventures that would test every assumption and challenge every comfort. The journey to Hogwarts was Luna's first extended exposure to the magical world's social dynamics, as the train compartments filled with students whose conversations revealed the complex hierarchies and expectations that governed life at school. She found herself sharing space with Ginny Weasley, a girl whose red hair and freckled face marked her as a member of the large family that lived near the Lovegood home, though their previous interactions had been limited to polite exchanges during chance encounters in the village. Ginny, despite being the same age as Luna and facing her own first day at Hogwarts, carried herself with the confidence that came from having 5 older brothers who had already navigated the school's challenges and could provide guidance about everything from avoiding certain staircases to identifying which professors were genuinely helpful versus those who were merely intimidating. Her easy familiarity with magical customs and Hogwarts traditions made her a natural leader among the first-year students, someone others instinctively looked to for reassurance and direction. Luna, by contrast, approached the journey with the dreamy observation that had characterized her response to every new experience, watching the landscape roll past the train windows, while listening to conversations that revealed as much about the speaker's assumptions and prejudices as they did about the ostensible subjects being discussed. She heard students categorizing each other based on family names and blood status, discussing their expectations for house sorting as if their entire futures depended on landing in the right dormitory, and expressing fears and hopes that revealed how thoroughly they had internalized the magical world's complex social structures. But where other students might have felt intimidated by the weight of tradition and expectation that surrounded Hogwarts attendance, Luna experienced only curiosity about what she would learn and whom she would meet in a place that had educated so many remarkable witches and wizards over the centuries. Her unique upbringing had given her confidence in her own worth that did not depend on external validation, allowing her to approach new situations with openness rather than defensiveness. The boat ride across the lake to Hogwarts Castle was Luna's first glimpse of the institution that would become her second home, and the sight that greeted her confirmed every story she had heard about the school's magnificent and slightly otherworldly architecture. The castle rose from its island, setting like something from the most wonderful kind of dream, its towers and battlements seeming to shift and change in the moonlight, as if the very stones were alive with accumulated magic. For someone who had grown up in a house that defied conventional architectural logic, Hogwarts represented not strangeness, but a natural evolution of the principle that form should follow magical function rather than mundane expectation. The Great Hall, when they finally entered it for the sorting ceremony, exceeded even Luna's considerable capacity for wonder. The ceiling that reflected the night sky outside, the floating candles that provided warm light without visible means of support, and the long tables filled with students whose faces showed every possible expression of excitement, nervousness, and anticipation created an atmosphere that seemed to pulse with the accumulated energy of generations of young people beginning their magical education. The sorting hat, when her turn finally came, took longer with Luna than with many of her classmates, its ancient consciousness working to understand a mind that operated according to principles that did not fit neatly into the traditional categories that defined the four houses. She sat beneath its worn fabric, feeling the strange sensation of having her thoughts examined by an intelligence that was both alien and oddly comforting, as if the hat's centuries of experience with unusual students had prepared it for exactly this type of challenge. "Difficult," the hat murmured in her ear, its voice carrying the weight of accumulated wisdom and just a hint of amusement. "Very difficult indeed. You have the courage of Gryffindor, certainly, and the loyalty of Hufflepuff is evident in your dedication to those you care about. But there's something else here, something that values knowledge for its own sake and sees truth in places where others see only confusion. Yes, I think there's only one place for you, Ravenclaw." The announcement was met with polite applause from the Ravenclaw table, though Luna could sense that her new housemates were still evaluating her based on first impressions that might or might not prove accurate. Ravenclaw House had a reputation for attracting students who valued intelligence and creativity, but it was also known for producing individuals whose intellectual pursuits sometimes made them seem detached from the practical concerns that motivated their peers. Luna suspected that she would find kindred spirits among her housemates, but she also understood that acceptance would have to be earned through demonstration rather than simply assumed. Her first few weeks at Hogwarts were a period of adjustment that tested every lesson her parents had taught her about maintaining authenticity in the face of social pressure. The Ravenclaw common room, with its circular layout and walls lined with books that seemed to whisper with accumulated knowledge, felt like a natural extension of her father's library. But the students who shared this space brought with them expectations and judgments that were far more challenging to navigate than any magical text or theoretical problem. Luna's appearance, which had never been a source of self-consciousness at home, became a topic of conversation among classmates who seemed to find her pale eyebrows and protuberant eyes endlessly fascinating in ways that were not always kind. Her hair, which she wore long and straight in defiance of current fashion trends, was described in terms that ranged from interesting to openly critical, as if her refusal to conform to conventional standards of beauty was somehow a personal affront to those who worked hard to meet such standards. But it was her behavior, rather than her appearance that truly set her apart from her fellow students and marked her as someone whose approach to life differed fundamentally from the norms that governed Hogwarts' social interaction. Where other first-year students struggled to master basic spells and adapt to the demands of academic life, Luna seemed to glide through her classes with an ease that suggested either unusual talent or a completely different understanding of what magical education was meant to accomplish. Her professors quickly recognized that she possessed both exceptional theoretical knowledge and an intuitive grasp of magical principles that allowed her to perform spells that other students found challenging, but they also noted that her attention seemed to be focused on aspects of magic that were not covered in standard curriculum. During transfiguration lessons, she would ask questions about the philosophical implications of changing one thing into another, wondering aloud whether the original object retained any sense of its former identity after transformation. In potions, she would inquire about the emotional states of ingredients and whether the brewer's feelings might influence the final product's effectiveness. These questions, while intellectually sophisticated, often disrupted the careful pacing that professors had developed for introducing complex concepts to 11-year-old minds. Some teachers found her curiosity refreshing and encouraged her to explore topics that went beyond basic requirements, while others became frustrated with what they perceived as showing off or deliberate attempts to complicate straightforward lessons. Luna, for her part, seemed genuinely unaware that her questions might be perceived as anything other than natural expressions of curiosity about subjects that fascinated her. The social challenges that accompanied her academic distinctiveness were more difficult to navigate than any theoretical problem or practical spellcasting exercise. Her fellow Ravenclaw students, while generally more tolerant of eccentricity than members of other houses might have been, still expected a certain level of conformity to group norms and shared assumptions about appropriate behavior. Luna's habit of staring dreamily out windows during conversations, her tendency to make observations that seemed to come from nowhere, and her complete indifference to fashion trends and social hierarchies marked her as someone who existed outside the normal frameworks that governed adolescent interaction. The development of her distinctive personal style during these early months at Hogwarts was not a conscious rebellion against expectations, but a natural expression of values and perspectives that her upbringing had instilled in her. The butterbeer cork necklace that became one of her most recognizable accessories was not chosen for its aesthetic appeal, but because her father had taught her that butterbeer corks could be strung together to ward off Nargles, invisible creatures whose mischievous activities could be prevented through appropriate protective measures. The radish earrings that prompted so much commentary from other students served a similar practical purpose. As Luna had learned that orange vegetables worn close to the head could enhance mental clarity and protect against confusion spells that might be cast by enemies seeking to cloud one's judgment. These accessories, which others saw as bizarre fashion choices, represented Luna's commitment to maintaining the protective practices that her parents had taught her, even in an environment where such practices were not understood or appreciated. But perhaps the most telling aspect of Luna's early Hogwarts experience was the way she handled the theft of her personal belongings, particularly her shoes, which seemed to disappear with disturbing regularity, despite her best efforts to keep track of them. Other students might have reported these incidents to prefects or professors, seeking official intervention to stop behavior that was clearly motivated by malice rather than accident. Luna, however, chose to interpret the disappearances through a framework that allowed her to maintain her sense of wonder while avoiding direct confrontation with those who sought to cause her distress. The Nargles that she blamed for her missing shoes were creatures that existed primarily in her father's writings and her own imagination. Invisible beings whose love of mischief and tendency to steal small objects made them convenient explanations for losses that might otherwise require her to acknowledge the deliberate cruelty of her classmates. By attributing the thefts to magical creatures rather than human malice, Luna could maintain her essentially optimistic view of the world while protecting herself from the emotional damage that would come from fully acknowledging how thoroughly some of her peers had rejected her. This coping mechanism, while psychologically protective, also served to reinforce other students' perception of her as someone whose grasp of reality was questionable at best. Her calm acceptance of repeated theft, combined with her matter-of-fact references to creatures that most people considered mythical, created an image of someone who was either deliberately playing a role or genuinely unable to distinguish between fantasy and fact. The nickname Loony Lovegood emerged from this perception, becoming a label that followed her through the corridors and classrooms of Hogwarts like an unwelcome shadow. The cruelty implicit in the nickname was not lost on Luna, despite her apparent indifference to social disapproval. She understood that her classmates were using the term to establish their own normalcy, in contrast to her strangeness, to create a comfortable distance between themselves and someone whose different approach to life made them question their own assumptions and choices. But rather than allowing this understanding to make her bitter or defensive, she chose to treat the nickname as evidence of her classmates' limited imagination rather than accurate assessment of her mental state. Ginny Weasley emerged as one of the few students willing to challenge this casual cruelty, her own experience as the youngest child in a large family having taught her to recognize and respond to bullying in its various forms. When she heard other students using the Loony nickname in tones that were clearly meant to be hurtful, she would intervene with the kind of direct confrontation that her brothers had taught her was sometimes necessary to protect those who could not or would not protect themselves. "Her name is Luna," Ginny would say with the quiet authority that came from being a Weasley, a family whose reputation for both loyalty and formidable magical ability made their disapproval something that sensible students preferred to avoid. If you're not clever enough to remember that, maybe you should spend more time studying and less time making fun of people who are actually interesting. These interventions, while appreciated by Luna, also highlighted how thoroughly she had been marginalized by her peers and how much she depended on others' protection for even basic respect. The friendship that developed between Luna and Ginny during this period was built on mutual recognition of each other's strength rather than sympathy for perceived weakness. Ginny saw in Luna someone whose confidence in her own worth was not dependent on external validation, a quality that she admired and hoped to develop in herself. Luna, for her part, recognized in Ginny someone whose loyalty was absolute and whose courage extended to defending principles, even when such defense required personal risk. Their conversations, conducted in quiet corners of the common room or during walks around the castle grounds, revealed the depth of understanding that existed beneath Luna's dreamy exterior and Ginny's more conventional presentation. Luna would share observations about magical theory and creature behavior that demonstrated the sophistication of her education and the keenness of her analytical abilities, while Ginny would provide insights into human psychology and social dynamics that helped Luna navigate situations that her unique upbringing had not prepared her for. But even with Ginny's friendship and protection, Luna's first years at Hogwarts were marked by a loneliness that was made more acute by the contrast between the warm acceptance she had known at home and the cool evaluation that characterized her treatment by most of her classmates. She learned to find solace in activities that allowed her to maintain connection with the values and interests that defined her identity. Spending long hours in the library researching topics that fascinated her, exploring parts of the castle that other students avoided, and writing letters to her father that described her experiences in terms that emphasized discovery rather than difficulty. Her approach to Quidditch exemplified her ability to find genuine enthusiasm for activities that others might have expected her to dismiss as too mundane for someone of her theoretical interests. She attended every Ravenclaw match wearing elaborate hats that demonstrated her house loyalty, while also expressing her creativity and disregard for conventional fashion. The eagle hat that flapped its wings in response to exciting plays became as much a part of the match experience for other spectators as the actual game being played, though opinions differed about whether her enthusiastic support was genuinely helpful or merely distracting. When Ravenclaw played against other houses, Luna's loyalty became more complex, as she found herself torn between supporting her housemates and cheering for teams that included friends like Ginny. Her solution was characteristically creative and completely practical. She would wear neutral colors during such matches and cheer for particularly good plays, regardless of which team made them, demonstrating her belief that excellence should be recognized wherever it appeared rather than only when it served partisan interests. Her second year at Hogwarts brought new challenges and revelations that would deepen her understanding of both magic and human nature. The revelation that she could see Thestrals, the skeletal winged horses that pulled the school carriages, came not as a surprise, but as confirmation of something she had long suspected about her own perceptions. Where other students saw empty carriages moving through apparently supernatural means, Luna observed magnificent creatures whose otherworldly beauty was visible only to those who had witnessed death firsthand. The ability to see Thestrals marked her as a member of a small and exclusive group, though it was not a membership that anyone would have chosen voluntarily. The magical theory behind Thestral visibility was well established. Only those who had seen death and understood what they were witnessing could perceive the creatures, as their existence straddled the boundary between life and whatever lay beyond. For Luna, this ability was simply another example of how her unusual experiences had given her access to aspects of the magical world that remained hidden from those whose lives had followed more conventional patterns. But the Thestrals also represented something more profound than mere magical sight. They were proof that loss and understanding were intimately connected. That wisdom often came at prices that could not be calculated in advance or avoided through careful planning. Luna's calm acceptance of their presence, her lack of fear or revulsion when confronted with creatures that many people found disturbing, demonstrated the psychological strength that had been forged during her childhood encounter with profound loss and had been reinforced through years of living authentically despite social pressure to conform. The third year brought new opportunities for intellectual exploration, as Luna was finally able to choose elective subjects that aligned more closely with her particular interests and talents. Her decision to take divination with Professor Trelawney was motivated not by belief in traditional fortune-telling methods, but by curiosity about the theoretical principles that might underlie prophetic ability and the psychological factors that influenced how people interpreted ambiguous information about future possibilities. Professor Trelawney's approach to divination, with its emphasis on dramatic predictions and elaborate interpretive frameworks, provided Luna with fascinating material for analysis rather than definitive answers about what the future might hold. She approached the subject with the same open-minded skepticism that her father had taught her to apply to all claims about supernatural phenomena, willing to consider possibilities that others might dismiss, but not prepared to accept assertions without evidence or logical foundation. Her essays for divination class became exercises in exploring the relationship between psychological expectation and perceived reality, examining how students' desires and fears might influence their interpretation of tea leaves, crystal balls, and other traditional divination tools. These papers, while meeting the technical requirements for the assignments, demonstrated a level of analytical sophistication that was unusual in third-year work, and revealed the depth of critical thinking that Luna applied to subjects that other students approached with either blind belief or complete dismissal. The Quidditch World Cup that she attended with her father during the summer between her third and fourth years provided her with her first exposure to large-scale magical events and the complex social dynamics that governed interactions between different magical communities. The experience was both exhilarating and educational, as Luna observed how wizards from different countries expressed their magical traditions through everything from tent decorations to celebratory spells, creating a multicultural festival that demonstrated the diversity that existed within the magical world. But perhaps more importantly, the World Cup allowed Luna to see her father interacting with his professional peers and admirers, watching as Xenophilius moved through crowds of people who recognized him as the editor of the Quibbler and sought his opinions about everything from magical creature legislation to conspiracy theories involving ministry corruption. These interactions revealed to Luna that her father's unconventional perspectives had earned him respect and influence within certain circles, even if they were dismissed or ridiculed by mainstream magical society. The events surrounding the World Cup, particularly the Death Eater attack that followed the match, provided Luna with her first direct exposure to the kinds of political tensions that would soon reshape the magical world. She watched as celebratory crowds transformed into panicked mobs, as peaceful festivities gave way to scenes of terror and confusion that demonstrated how quickly civilized behavior could collapse when confronted with organized malevolence. But even in the midst of chaos and fear, Luna maintained the observational detachment that had become her characteristic response to crisis situations, noting details about the attacker's methods and motivations that others missed while focusing on immediate survival concerns. Her ability to remain analytically engaged even during moments of personal danger would prove valuable in the challenges that lay ahead, as the magical world entered a period of conflict that would test every assumption about safety and security that her generation had taken for granted. The transition from third to fourth year marked a subtle but significant shift in how other students perceived and interacted with Luna, as her consistent authenticity and demonstrated magical competence began to earn grudging respect even from those who continued to find her behavior puzzling. The nickname Loony persisted, but it was increasingly used with affection rather than malice by those who had learned to appreciate her unique perspective and unshakable loyalty to her principles. This growing acceptance was not universal or complete. There remained students who viewed her strangeness as evidence of mental instability or deliberate attention-seeking behavior. But the core group of peers who shared classes and common spaces with Luna had learned that her unconventional responses often contained insights that were worth considering seriously, even when those insights were expressed in language that seemed to come from an entirely different understanding of how the world operated. Her fourth year would bring the encounters and relationships that would define the remainder of her Hogwarts experience and shape her role in the larger conflicts that were beginning to engulf the magical world. The lonely girl who had arrived at school 3 years earlier with butterbeer cork necklaces and missing shoes had evolved into someone whose wisdom was sought by those brave enough to look past surface strangeness to the remarkable mind that lay beneath. But the foundation for everything that would follow had been laid during these early years of adjustment and growth, when Luna learned that being different in a world that valued conformity required not just courage but strategy, not just authenticity but resilience. The girl who had once conversed with empty air and blamed Nargles for her missing possessions had discovered that her unique way of seeing the world was not a weakness to be overcome, but a strength to be refined and applied in service of causes larger than her own comfort or acceptance. The fourth year would bring Harry Potter and his friends into her life, along with the recognition that her particular combination of insight and fearlessness was exactly what the magical world needed, as it faced challenges that conventional wisdom and traditional approaches would prove inadequate to address. But that transformation was still ahead. For now, Luna remained the dreamy Ravenclaw girl who danced to music that others could not hear, content in her own understanding of what mattered most, and prepared to share that understanding with anyone wise enough to listen. The autumn of Luna's fourth year at Hogwarts arrived with an electric tension that seemed to permeate the very stones of the castle, as if the ancient walls themselves could sense that momentous events were gathering like storm clouds on the horizon. The magical world stood balanced on the edge of changes that would reshape everything its inhabitants had believed about safety and truth. Though most students remained blissfully unaware that their comfortable assumptions about the nature of good and evil were about to be challenged in ways that would test every lesson they had learned about courage and loyalty. Luna felt the approaching transformation in ways that others could not perceive. Her enhanced sensitivity to magical currents and emotional undercurrents, allowing her to detect disturbances that existed just beyond the range of normal perception. The air itself seemed charged with possibility and danger, creating an atmosphere that reminded her of the moments before her mother's final experiment, when reality had held its breath before reshaping itself around an absence that could never be filled. But where that earlier transformation had brought only loss, this new change carried within it the seeds of connections that would prove more valuable than anything she had yet discovered. The Hogwarts Express journey that marked the beginning of her fourth year became the moment when Luna's carefully constructed solitude was breached by individuals whose own struggles with acceptance and belonging created natural bridges to her isolated world. The train compartment that had once provided refuge from the social complexities of school life was suddenly filled with voices and personalities that demanded attention and offered, for the first time since her arrival at Hogwarts, the possibility of genuine friendship based on mutual understanding rather than sympathetic tolerance. Harry Potter entered her sphere of awareness not as the famous boy who lived, but as someone whose eyes carried the particular weight that came from witnessing death and surviving experiences that others could not comprehend. Luna recognized immediately that quality of having seen too much too young, the premature wisdom that marked those who had learned that the world contained more darkness than childhood should have to acknowledge. His ability to see the thestrals that pulled the school carriages confirmed what her enhanced perception had already revealed. Here was someone who understood loss in ways that created possibilities for connection that went beyond surface pleasantries. Ron Weasley's presence brought different energies to the compartment, his combination of humor and insecurity creating a dynamic that Luna found both amusing and poignant. She could see beneath his attempts at casual confidence to the deeper uncertainties that drove his need for acceptance and recognition, understanding that his jokes and commentary were often defensive mechanisms designed to deflect attention from vulnerabilities that he was not yet ready to acknowledge. But she also recognized in him a fundamental decency and loyalty that would prove invaluable in the challenges ahead. Even if he did not yet understand the full scope of what those challenges might demand, Hermione Granger's intellectual brilliance was immediately apparent to someone who had grown up surrounded by books and theoretical discussions. But Luna also perceived the rigid boundaries that Hermione had constructed around her understanding of what was possible and what was merely fantasy. The encounter that would follow between them regarding the existence of creatures like blibbering humdingers and crumplehorn snorkax revealed the fundamental difference in their approaches to knowledge. Where Hermione demanded proof before belief, Luna remained open to possibilities that had not yet been definitively disproven. Neville Longbottom's quiet presence in the compartment carried its own significance for Luna, as she recognized in him someone whose struggles with confidence and competence masked deeper reservoirs of strength that had not yet been fully accessed. His reluctance to sit with her initially was not personal rejection, but evidence of how thoroughly the social hierarchies of Hogwarts had convinced him that association with those considered strange or unpopular would only make his own position more precarious. But Luna understood that such calculations were based on fear rather than wisdom, and that true friendship required courage to look beyond surface appearances, to recognize worth that might not be immediately obvious. The scene that unfolded when Luna was discovered reading the Quibbler upside down became a perfect illustration of the different ways that people approached information and understanding. Where others might have seen evidence of eccentricity or attention-seeking behavior, Luna was actually demonstrating a reading technique that her father had taught her for detecting hidden meanings and alternative perspectives that might be concealed within conventional presentations of information. The practice of inverting text forced the reader to focus on individual words and phrases, rather than allowing familiar patterns of meaning to guide interpretation, sometimes revealing insights that normal reading methods would miss entirely. Ron's joke about her reading habits, while not particularly sophisticated or original, struck Luna as genuinely funny, not because of its content, but because of what it revealed about his assumptions and the gap between his perception of her behavior and her actual motivations. Her laughter, which seemed disproportionate to the humor involved, was actually a response to the delightful absurdity of the entire situation. Here she was, surrounded by people who would become some of the most important figures in the magical world's struggle against darkness, and they were concerned about whether she was reading a magazine correctly. The revelation that Harry could now see the Thestrals provided Luna with her first opportunity to offer genuine comfort and understanding to someone whose experiences paralleled her own in meaningful ways. His confusion and distress at suddenly perceiving creatures that had apparently appeared from nowhere was familiar to anyone who had learned that witness to death came with permanent alterations, to perception that could never be undone or forgotten, but where Harry seemed to interpret his new ability as evidence that something was wrong with him. Luna recognized it as proof that he was developing the enhanced awareness that would be essential for the battles ahead. "You're not going mad," she told him with the matter-of-fact certainty that had become her trademark approach to situations where others might have offered sympathy or elaborate explanations. "I can see them too. You're just as sane as I am." The qualification at the end of her statement was both humorous and profound, acknowledging that sanity itself was a relative concept when applied to people whose lives had been shaped by experiences that most of the world would consider impossible or imaginary. Her immediate and absolute belief in Harry's claims about Voldemort's return represented more than simple acceptance of his testimony, but recognition that the patterns of darkness and deception she had been sensing were finally coalescing into forms that could be identified and confronted. Where ministry officials, and even some teachers, preferred to dismiss his account as trauma-induced fantasy or attention-seeking behavior, Luna understood that truth often wore disguises that made it difficult for conventional minds to accept or acknowledge. The encounter in the greenhouse where their classes passed each other provided Luna with the perfect opportunity to offer Harry the support and validation that he desperately needed, but was not receiving from official sources. Her direct approach to the subject, making a beeline for him, and announcing her belief in his story without preamble or social niceties, might have seemed abrupt or strange to outside observers, but it was exactly what the situation required. Harry needed to know that someone believed him completely and without reservation, that his experiences were being taken seriously by at least one person whose judgment he could trust. "I believe he who must not be named is back, and I believe you fought him and escaped from him, she said with the kind of straightforward honesty that cut through weeks of doubt and isolation like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Her words carried weight not because of any special authority she possessed, but because they came from someone who had proven herself capable of seeing truth in places where others perceived only confusion or impossibility. The disagreement with Hermione that followed immediately after this declaration illustrated perfectly the philosophical divide that separated Luna's approach to knowledge from more conventional academic methods. Hermione's dismissal of creatures like blibbering humdingers and crumplehorned snorkax was based on the absence of documented evidence and peer-reviewed research, a reasonable position that reflected her scientific training and commitment to empirical methodology. But Luna's withering look in response came from understanding that the history of magical discovery was filled with creatures and phenomena that had once been considered mythical before being definitively proven to exist. The formation of Dumbledore's army represented a turning point, not just in the magical world's response to Voldemort's return, but in Luna's own journey from isolation to belonging. Here, finally, was a group of students who were willing to acknowledge that the comfortable assumptions of peacetime education were inadequate preparation for the realities they would soon face. The organization provided Luna with her first opportunity to demonstrate that her unusual perspectives and seemingly impractical knowledge could be applied in ways that served concrete purposes and helped others develop the skills they would need for survival. Her performance during Defense Against the Dark Arts training sessions revealed capabilities that surprised even those who had begun to appreciate her unique talents. The spells that other students struggled to master seemed to come naturally to her, as if her unconventional education had prepared her for exactly this type of practical application. But more impressive than her magical ability was her psychological preparation for the scenarios they practiced. Her lack of panic or hesitation when faced with simulated life or death situations that left other students shaken and uncertain. The enchanted coins that Harry used to communicate with Dumbledore's army members became precious possessions for Luna, not because of their magical properties, but because they represented concrete proof that she was valued as part of a community that shared her commitment to truth and justice. The coins were physical manifestations of trust and inclusion, evidence that her perspectives and abilities were considered essential to the group's success, rather than merely tolerated out of politeness or sympathy. Her father's agreement to publish Harry's story in the Quibbler represented a convergence of personal loyalty and professional principle that demonstrated the values that had shaped Luna's character from childhood. Xenophilius understood that his magazine's credibility was built on willingness to explore unpopular truths rather than simply reporting information that readers wanted to hear. And Harry's account of Voldemort's return was exactly the kind of important story that mainstream publications were refusing to cover due to political pressure and institutional cowardice. The collaboration with Rita Skeeter, despite that journalist's questionable reputation and history of sensationalized reporting, proved to be strategically brilliant in ways that reflected Luna's sophisticated understanding of how information spread through magical society. Skeeter's involvement ensured that the story would be written with the kind of dramatic flair and attention-grabbing details that would capture public attention, while the Quibbler's publication provided a platform that could not be suppressed through normal ministry channels. The unprecedented sales success of that particular issue of the Quibbler validated Luna's faith in her father's editorial judgment and demonstrated that the magical public was hungry for honest reporting about events that other publications were either ignoring or actively covering up. The fact that no copy of the magazine had ever sold faster proved that truth. When finally available, created its own demand, regardless of the official narrative being promoted by government sources. Professor Umbridge's decision to ban the Quibbler from Hogwarts represented exactly the kind of authoritarian overreach that Luna had been taught to recognize and resist, but it also provided an unexpected strategic advantage by creating forbidden fruit appeal that ensured every student in the castle would read the article. Luna watched with quiet satisfaction as copies of her father's magazine passed from hand to hand in secret, understanding that Umbridge's censorship efforts had accomplished the opposite of their intended effect. The break-in to Umbridge's office that followed Harry's vision of Sirius being tortured tested every skill that Luna had developed during her years of navigating dangerous situations with calm observation and strategic thinking. Her role as lookout required not just vigilance, but the ability to distinguish between genuine threats and false alarms, to maintain concentration despite stress and uncertainty, and to coordinate with others whose approaches to crisis management might differ significantly from her own methods. The capture by Umbridge and her inquisitorial squad that followed their discovery represented Luna's first direct confrontation with the kind of institutional evil that she had previously known only through her father's articles and theoretical discussions. Being restrained and gagged by fellow students who were acting under official authority provided her with first-hand experience of how quickly civilized behavior could deteriorate when power was exercised without accountability or moral restraint. But even in captivity, Luna's response remained characteristically composed and observational, as she stared dreamily out the window as if the entire situation were merely another interesting phenomenon to be studied rather than a genuine threat to her safety and freedom. This behavior, which others might have interpreted as evidence of detachment from reality, actually represented sophisticated psychological management. By refusing to grant her captors the satisfaction of seeing her distressed or frightened, she maintained her sense of personal autonomy, even under conditions designed to break down individual resistance. The escape from Umbridge's custody and the subsequent journey to the Ministry of Magic on Thestrals marked Luna's transition from supportive friend to active participant in the larger conflict that was reshaping the magical world. Her suggestion that they use the winged skeletal horses for transportation demonstrated both her practical knowledge of magical creatures and her understanding that desperate situations required creative solutions that went beyond conventional approaches to problem solving. The flight to London provided Luna with her first experience of magical combat conducted at the highest levels, as Death Eaters, who had spent years perfecting techniques for capturing and killing opponents, faced a group of teenagers whose only advantages were determination and the element of surprise. The battle that followed in the Department of Mysteries would test every lesson she had learned about courage and loyalty, forcing her to apply theoretical knowledge in situations where mistakes would have fatal consequences not just for herself but for friends whose survival depended on her ability to function effectively under extreme pressure. The Hall of Prophecy, with its towering shelves of glowing orbs containing predictions about future events, represented exactly the kind of magical phenomenon that Luna had been raised to find fascinating rather than frightening. But she also understood intuitively that they had entered a place where the stakes were higher than anything they had previously encountered, where the consequences of failure would extend far beyond personal disappointment or academic setbacks to encompass the fate of everyone they cared about. Her performance during the running battle through the ministry's various departments demonstrated that years of theoretical preparation and unconventional education had produced practical abilities that were more than adequate for real-world application. She fought with the same calm concentration that she brought to her studies, treating each tactical challenge as an interesting problem to be solved rather than a life-threatening crisis to be survived through luck or desperation. The protection of Ron after he was struck by a spell that left him confused and disoriented revealed Luna's instinctive understanding that effective combat required more than individual heroics, but coordinated effort to ensure that no one was left behind or abandoned to enemy action. Her ability to maintain awareness of her friends' conditions while continuing to engage hostile forces demonstrated the kind of situational consciousness that military theorists spent years trying to develop in professional soldiers. When Ginny was seized by the ankle and Luna attacked the Death Eater responsible, breaking Ginny's ankle in the process, she faced the kind of tactical decision that had no perfect solution, accepting unavoidable harm to prevent greater damage, choosing between competing priorities when all available options carried significant costs. Her ability to make such decisions quickly and without paralyzing regret showed psychological maturity that exceeded her chronological age and formal training. The withdrawal of both confused Ron and injured Ginny from active combat while maintaining defensive coverage demonstrated Luna's understanding that successful operations required knowing when to advance and when to consolidate, when to take risks and when to minimize exposure. Her reunion with Harry and Neville in the Death Chamber represented tactical regrouping under conditions that most people would have found completely overwhelming, but Luna approached the situation with the same methodical problem-solving that she applied to academic challenges. The voices beyond the veil that both Harry and Luna could hear represented confirmation of the connection between their shared experience of witnessing death and their enhanced perception of phenomena that remained hidden from those whose lives had followed more conventional patterns. The ancient archway that marked the boundary between life and whatever lay beyond was visible to everyone, but only those who had truly understood mortality could perceive the sounds that suggested conscious existence continued in some form after physical death. Luna's quiet statement that she could hear the voices too provided Harry with validation that his perceptions were accurate rather than symptoms of trauma or psychological breakdown, but it also represented her own processing of what this shared ability might mean about the nature of death and the possibility of eventual reunion with loved ones who had passed beyond the physical world. Her mother's voice might be among those speaking from behind the veil, offering comfort and guidance from a realm that normal perception could not access. The stunning spell that eventually rendered Luna unconscious and threw her across the chamber floor was administered with the casual brutality that characterized Death Eater combat methods, but her survival of the encounter and relatively quick recovery demonstrated both physical resilience and magical protection that she had developed through years of careful preparation and practical experience. Her consciousness returned just as the battle was ending, allowing her to witness Voldemort's appearance and the confrontation between the Dark Lord and Dumbledore that would reshape everyone's understanding of the conflict they were facing. The return to Hogwarts after the Ministry battle found Luna processing experiences that would have traumatized most people her age, but she approached the psychological integration with the same methodical patience that she applied to understanding new magical theories or creature behaviors. The night's events had confirmed her father's warnings about the return of dark forces, while also proving that resistance was possible when ordinary people chose to act courageously despite overwhelming odds. Her conversation with Harry about Sirius's death represented perhaps the most important moment in their developing friendship, as Luna drew upon her own experience of loss to offer perspective that no one else could provide. Her words about continuing to feel sad about her mother's death while finding comfort in the possibility of eventual reunion carried weight precisely because they came from someone who had navigated similar grief and emerged with faith in larger patterns that connected life and death in meaningful ways. "I still feel very sad about it sometimes," she said with the honesty that had become her trademark approach to difficult subjects. "But I've still got Dad. And anyway, it's not as though I'm never going to see her again, is it? You heard them just behind the veil, didn't you?" Her ability to find hope within loss, to discover possibility within apparent endings, provided Harry with emotional tools that would prove essential for the challenges ahead while demonstrating the depth of wisdom that Luna had developed through her own encounters with mortality and survival. The summer break that followed the Ministry battle was spent processing experiences that had fundamentally changed Luna's understanding of her role in the larger conflict reshaping the magical world. The girl who had once been content to exist on the margins of Hogwarts' social life had discovered that her unique perspectives and abilities were not merely tolerated differences, but essential contributions to efforts that would determine the fate of everything she valued. The friendships forged in crisis had proven more durable and meaningful than any relationships based on conventional compatibility or shared interests. Her bedroom ceiling project during this period represented both artistic expression and emotional processing, as Luna painted the faces of her friends with the kind of attention to detail that reflected how precious these connections had become to her. The golden chain that connected the portraits, spelling out the word friendship in endless repetition, created a visual reminder of the bonds that had been forged through shared danger and mutual support, relationships that had transformed her from isolated observer to active participant in events that would shape history. The return to Hogwarts for her 5th year would bring new challenges and opportunities, but Luna now possessed something that had been missing during her earlier school years: genuine friendships, based on mutual respect and proven loyalty, rather than sympathy or casual acquaintance. The experiences of the previous year had demonstrated that her father's teachings about remaining true to one's authentic self while contributing meaningfully to important causes were not just philosophical ideals, but practical approaches to living that could produce real results when, applied with courage and consistency. The transformation was subtle but profound. Luna remained the dreamy girl who saw Nargles behind missing possessions and believed in creatures that others dismissed as fantasy, but she was now also someone whose wisdom and courage had been tested under fire and proven worthy of trust by people whose own character had been forged through similar trials. The foundation had been laid for everything that would follow, as darkness gathered across the magical world and ordinary people were called upon to make choices that would reveal whether they possessed the strength to stand against forces that threatened to destroy everything that made life worth living. The ancient Department of Mysteries had always been a place where the boundaries between life and death, between known and unknowable, existed in states of perpetual flux that defied conventional understanding of how reality was supposed to operate. The circular chamber with its dancing flames and mysterious doors had witnessed countless attempts by the Ministry's most brilliant minds to penetrate secrets that might have been better left undisturbed, but none of those previous investigations had prepared the space for the convergence of forces that would transform it into a battlefield where the fate of the magical world would be decided through violence that transcended normal categories of conflict. Standing beside Harry Potter in that place of ancient power, Luna Lovegood felt the weight of accumulated mystery pressing against her consciousness like invisible hands, seeking to reshape her understanding of what was possible and what was merely hoped for. The archway that dominated the chamber's center drew her attention not because of its obvious significance, but because of the sounds that emanated from beyond its tattered veil. Voices that spoke with the clarity of memory and the distance of dreams, calling to those who possessed the enhanced perception necessary to bridge the gap between worlds. Can you hear them too? Harry's question carried the desperate hope of someone who needed confirmation that his experiences were shared rather than symptoms of psychological breakdown, but Luna's response came not from desire to comfort, but from recognition of truth that demanded acknowledgement regardless of its emotional implications. The voices beyond the veil were as real as anything else in the magical world. though their reality existed in dimensions that most people could not access without paying prices that few were prepared to accept. "There aren't any voices, Harry," Hermione said with the firm conviction of someone whose understanding of reality was bounded by empirical evidence and peer-reviewed research. But her words only highlighted the limitations that conventional education imposed on perception. Where she heard nothing but silence, and perhaps the whisper of ancient magic moving through stone corridors, Harry and Luna perceived conversations that suggested consciousness continued beyond physical death in forms that retained individual identity and emotional connection to the living world. "I hear them too," Luna replied with the matter-of-fact certainty that had become her trademark response to phenomena that others found difficult to accept or understand. Her confirmation carried weight precisely because it came from someone whose enhanced perception had been proven accurate in previous situations where conventional wisdom had failed to grasp the full scope of what was actually occurring. The voices were not hallucinations or wishful thinking, but genuine communications from beings who existed in states that normal human experience could not encompass. The veil itself seemed to respond to their acknowledgement of the voices, its tattered fabric moving in ways that had nothing to do with air currents, and everything to do with the presence of observers who could perceive its true function. This was not merely a decorative element or ancient artifact, but an active portal between dimensions, a carefully maintained gateway that allowed limited communication between the world of the living and whatever realm awaited those who had passed beyond the constraints of physical existence. Luna's understanding of what they were experiencing drew upon lessons that her mother's death had taught her about the continuity that connected all forms of life and consciousness. The explosion that had claimed Pandora Lovegood had been sudden and complete, leaving no body to mourn or grave to visit. But Luna had never believed that her mother's essence had simply ceased to exist. The veil in the Department of Mysteries provided confirmation that death was transformation rather than termination, that love and consciousness could persist in forms that remained accessible to those who possessed the courage and sensitivity necessary to perceive them. The theory that would later develop around the voices suggested that Harry and Luna's shared ability to hear them was directly connected to their status as witnesses to death who had understood what they were seeing. Just as their experience of mortality had allowed them to perceive thestrals that remained invisible to those whose lives had been protected from such harsh realities. Their encounter with the ultimate mystery had opened channels of perception that normal human consciousness kept carefully sealed. But the voices carried more than theoretical significance for Luna. They represented hope that the relationships torn apart by death could eventually be restored, that the love between parent and child was stronger than the physical boundaries that seemed to separate them. Her mother's voice might be among those calling from beyond the veil, offering guidance and comfort from a realm where the experimental magic that had claimed her physical form no longer posed any danger to those she had left behind. The battle that erupted around them eventually silenced the voices as immediate survival concerns demanded complete attention and focus. But the memory of what they had heard would remain with both Harry and Luna as evidence that their losses were temporary rather than permanent. The knowledge that consciousness persisted beyond physical death provided psychological strength that would prove essential during the trials ahead, when the temptation to surrender to despair would challenge every assumption they held about the value of continued resistance. The return to Hogwarts after the Ministry battle found Luna processing experiences that had fundamentally altered her understanding of her role in the larger conflict reshaping the magical world. But it also marked the beginning of a period when the friendships forged in crisis would be tested by the mundane challenges of daily life and social interaction. The bonds created through shared danger needed to prove their durability in environments where life or death stakes were replaced by academic pressure and adolescent drama. where the clarity of purpose that came from fighting evil was obscured by the complex ambiguities of normal teenage existence. Her bedroom ceiling project during the summer break represented both artistic expression and emotional processing, as Luna painted portraits of her friends with the kind of meticulous attention to detail that reflected how precious these relationships had become to someone who had spent most of her school years in social isolation. Each face was rendered with love and careful observation, capturing not just physical appearance, but the essential qualities that made each person uniquely valuable and irreplaceable. Ron's portrait showed him in a moment of genuine laughter, his freckled face lit with the kind of uncomplicated joy that had first drawn Luna's attention during their train ride together. She had learned to see past his insecurities and defensive humor to the fundamental decency and loyalty that made him willing to risk everything for people he cared about, even when such risks exceeded his comfort level or challenged his assumptions about what he was capable of accomplishing. Hermione's image captured her in a moment of intense concentration, her bushy hair framing a face that radiated intelligence and determination, but also showed traces of the vulnerability that she worked so hard to conceal behind academic achievement and logical analysis. Luna had come to appreciate Hermione's commitment to truth and justice, even when they disagreed about what forms truth might take and what methods were appropriate for discovering it. Harry's portrait was perhaps the most complex, showing him with the weight of premature responsibility visible in eyes that had seen too much, too young, but also carried hope that refused to be extinguished despite repeated encounters with darkness and loss. Luna understood better than most the burden that Harry carried as the focal point of conflicts he had never chosen, and her painting attempted to capture both his strength and his need for support from people who understood the costs of standing against impossible odds. Ginny's face looked out from the ceiling with the fierce determination that had first caught Luna's attention when the younger Weasley had defended her against bullying classmates. But the portrait also revealed the gentleness and compassion that motivated Ginny's protective instincts. Their friendship had developed through mutual recognition of each other's inner strength, and Luna's painting celebrated the courage that allowed Ginny to remain kind in a world that often rewarded cruelty. Neville's image showed him in a moment of quiet confidence, his round face reflecting the transformation that was beginning to occur as he discovered reservoirs of bravery and competence that years of self-doubt had kept hidden. Luna had recognized his potential long before he began to fulfill it, and her portrait captured not just who he was, but who he was becoming. As circumstances demanded growth that no one could have predicted or planned, the golden chain that connected all 5 portraits spelled out the word friendship in endless repetition, creating a visual representation of the bonds that had transformed Luna from isolated observer to active participant in events that would shape the magical world's future. The metallic thread wove between and around the painted faces like visible proof that relationships based on mutual respect and shared values could transcend the superficial differences that kept most people separated by artificial boundaries. But the ceiling was more than decoration or sentimental expression. It served as daily reminder of why the struggles ahead were worth enduring, what values were at stake in the larger conflict that was consuming the magical world. Each morning when Luna woke and each night before she slept, she saw evidence that love and loyalty could create connections strong enough to survive any test that evil might devise. That friendship was not just personal comfort, but political resistance against forces that sought to divide and conquer through fear and hatred. The return to Hogwarts for her 5th year brought immediate confirmation that the comfortable illusions of peacetime education were being swept away by realities that demanded adult responses from students who were still struggling to understand their own identities and capabilities. The absence of Dumbledore's army meetings left a void that could not be filled by conventional classes or normal social activities, creating restlessness among students who had discovered that they possessed abilities and courage that exceeded anything their previous experiences had suggested. Luna found herself particularly affected by the loss of regular training sessions and group meetings that had provided structure and purpose during her 4th year, when the existence of an organized resistance movement had offered concrete ways to channel her desire to contribute meaningfully to the fight against darkness. Without those gatherings, she faced the challenge of maintaining her sense of mission and connection to larger purposes, while navigating the increasingly trivial concerns that dominated daily life in an institution that was pretending the war did not exist. The Dumbledore's army coin that she carried became a talisman more valuable than any magical artifact, a physical reminder of bonds that transcended the artificial separations imposed by house loyalties and academic hierarchies. She would check it frequently during those lonely months, hoping for messages that would signal renewed activity and shared purpose. But the coin remained frustratingly silent as Harry struggled with his own demons, and the adults who should have provided guidance remained paralyzed by political considerations and institutional inertia. The loneliness that characterized this period was more acute than anything Luna had experienced during her earlier years at Hogwarts, when social isolation had been a familiar condition that she had learned to navigate through internal resources and solitary pursuits. The difference now was that she had tasted genuine friendship and collaborative action, making the return to isolation feel like punishment rather than natural state. She had discovered that she was capable of deep connection and meaningful contribution, only to have those opportunities withdrawn when circumstances changed and priorities shifted. Ginny's intervention when other students used the Loony nickname in her presence demonstrated the kind of loyalty that justified Luna's faith in the friendships they had developed, but it also highlighted how dependent she had become on others' protection for even basic respect. The girl who had once been content to exist on the margins of school society now found herself craving acceptance and belonging in ways that made her vulnerable to disappointments that her younger self would have dismissed as irrelevant to her real interests and goals. "What did you call her?" Ginny's voice carried the kind of quiet authority that came from being raised in a family where standing up for others was considered basic decency rather than optional heroics, but it also revealed the depth of affection and protectiveness that had developed between the two girls through shared experiences and mutual understanding. The confrontation that followed sent clear messages about the consequences that would follow attempts to demean someone under Ginny Weasley's protection. The gratitude that Luna felt for such interventions was complicated by awareness that she should have been capable of defending herself rather than relying on others to fight battles that were fundamentally about her right to exist authentically in spaces where difference was not tolerated. Her parents had raised her to believe that authenticity was its own form of strength, but the reality of adolescent social dynamics suggested that individual conviction was insufficient when confronted by coordinated hostility from people who found comfort in conformity and safety, in excluding those who challenged their assumptions. Harry's invitation to Slughorn's Christmas party provided Luna with an opportunity to demonstrate that her unusual perspectives could be assets rather than obstacles in social situations where creativity and originality were valued over conventional behavior. The party represented a different kind of challenge than anything she had previously encountered. Not combat or crisis, but the subtle negotiations of adult social interaction, where success was measured by ability to contribute meaningfully to conversations that ranged across topics she had never formally studied. Her choice of spangled silver robes for the occasion reflected both her indifference to conventional fashion and her understanding that the party was theatre as much as social gathering, an event where costumes and performances were expected rather than discouraged. The giggles that her appearance prompted were not entirely unsympathetic. as some attendees recognized that her outfit was deliberately theatrical rather than accidentally inappropriate for the setting and context. The conversation with Professor Trelawney that followed provided Luna with insights into how different people processed information about the future and the unknown, comparing the divination teacher's dramatic interpretative methods with the more subtle approaches that Luna had learned from her father's investigations into prophetic phenomena. The discussion revealed that both women shared similar interests in subjects that mainstream magical education treated as either suspect or purely theoretical, but their approaches to evidence and interpretation differed significantly. Her comment about the Aurora conspiracy involving root fangs and gum disease demonstrated Luna's ability to synthesize information from multiple sources into theories that were simultaneously absurd and logically coherent, creating statements that were clearly humorous, while also containing subtle critiques of institutional behavior and official narratives. Harry's hysterical laughter in response suggested that he understood both the joke and the underlying point about the need to question authority figures who claim to have citizens' best interests at heart. The Auras are part of the Rotfang conspiracy. I thought everyone knew that. They're working to bring down the Ministry of Magic from within using a combination of dark magic and gum disease. The statement was delivered with Luna's characteristic matter-of-fact tone, as if she were sharing commonly known information rather than spinning elaborate fantasy. But the content revealed her sophisticated understanding of how conspiracy theories functioned as both entertainment and social commentary. The expedition to search for crumplehorn snorkax that she and her father undertook during school holidays represented continuation of the values and activities that had defined their relationship since her mother's death. But these adventures had taken on new significance now that Luna understood how her unique education had prepared her for challenges that conventional schooling could never have anticipated. The creatures they sought might or might not exist in physical form, but the search itself served important functions in maintaining their bond and reinforcing their shared commitment to remaining open to possibilities that others dismissed without investigation. Her father's increasing prominence in the resistance movement through his editorship of The Quibbler had created new pressures and opportunities for their family, as Xenophilius used his publication to support Harry Potter's claims about Voldemort's return despite official disapproval and potential legal consequences. The magazine's role in challenging ministry propaganda made the Lovegoods targets for retaliation, but it also provided them with platform for influencing public opinion and supporting causes they believed were essential for the magical world's survival. The Quidditch commentary that Luna provided during her 5th year became legendary among students who attended the matches, not because of her expertise about the sport, but because of her unique approach to describing events that combined technical analysis with philosophical observations and personal commentary that had nothing to do with the game being played. Her forgetfulness about players' names and scores was less important than her ability to find meaning and entertainment in activities that others approached with grim competitiveness or routine spectatorship. And that's Smith of Hufflepuff with the quaffle, she would announce dreamily, her voice carrying across the stadium through magically enhanced projection. He did the commentary last game too, remember? And he kept making rude remarks about everyone. But commentators are supposed to be unbiased. Oh, look, he's fallen off, what a shame. He was quite good at staying on his broom. Oh, and now that big Hufflepuff player's got the quaffle from her. I can't remember his name, it's something like Bibble No Buggins. It's Cadwallader, someone would shout from the crowd, but Luna would continue her observations without acknowledging the correction, lost in contemplation of broader patterns and meanings that she perceived in the organized chaos of competitive flying. Her commentary became as much a part of the match experience as the game itself, with students attending as much to hear what unexpected insights she might share as to support their house teams. Ron's gradual change of opinion about Luna during this period reflected growing appreciation for qualities that he had initially found puzzling or annoying, as he began to understand that her strangeness was not affectation or attention-seeking behavior, but authentic expression of perspectives that had been shaped by experiences unlike anything in his own background. His comment that, "She's grown on me," represented acknowledgement that difference could be valuable rather than merely tolerable, that Luna's unique insights were worth the social awkwardness that sometimes accompanied her presence. The Death Eater attack on Hogwarts at the end of the school year provided Luna with another opportunity to demonstrate that her courage and capabilities extended far beyond theoretical knowledge or unusual perception, as she responded to the emergency with the same calm competence that had characterized her performance during the Ministry battle. The coordination required to respond effectively to the Dumbledore's army coin and provide meaningful assistance during the crisis showed that she had internalized lessons about teamwork and strategic thinking that would serve her well in the larger conflicts ahead. Her presence in Snape's office with Hermione when Professor Flitwick arrived with news of the Death Eater infiltration placed her at the center of events that would reshape the school's administration and reveal the full extent of betrayal that had been festering within institutions that students had been taught to trust without question. The thud they heard when Flitwick entered the office, followed by Snape's casual explanation that the tiny professor had collapsed and needed medical attention, created one of those moments when surface explanations felt insufficient, but alternative interpretations were too terrible to acknowledge directly. The guilt that both girls felt afterward about allowing Snape to leave the scene would haunt them for months, as they wondered whether different choices might have prevented the tragedy that followed. But their decision to trust an authority figure rather than act on suspicions that seemed to be based more on intuition than evidence reflected the psychological conditioning that made it difficult for students to challenge professors even when their behavior raised legitimate concerns about their motivations and loyalties. The liquid luck that Ron and Hermione had consumed before the battle provided protection that extended to all the Dumbledore's army members who participated in the defense of the castle, creating a bubble of enhanced probability that ensured their survival despite the overwhelming odds they faced. The magic involved in Felix Felicis was complex and temporary, but its effects during those crucial hours demonstrated how individual preparation and foresight could influence outcomes that seemed to be determined by forces beyond any single person's control. Neville's injury during the battle, while relatively minor in the context of what might have happened, served as a reminder that even the most careful preparation and magical protection could not eliminate all risks or prevent all harm to those who chose to stand against evil. Luna's assistance in helping him to a seat at Dumbledore's funeral reflected the care and loyalty that had become hallmarks of their friendship, the understanding that supporting each other through difficult times was as important as fighting together against external enemies. The funeral itself represented the end of an era and the beginning of a new phase in the magical world's struggle against forces that sought to destroy everything that made life worth living. But it also provided opportunity for reflection on what they had learned and what challenges lay ahead. Luna's presence among the mourners, her quiet dignity and obvious grief for a man she had known primarily through reputation and brief encounters, demonstrated the depth of her commitment to causes that transcended personal experience or immediate benefit. The summer that followed would bring new trials and revelations that would test every lesson she had learned about friendship and loyalty. But the foundation had been established through years of gradual growth and increasingly challenging experiences. The girl who had once existed on the margins of school society had become someone whose wisdom and courage were recognized and valued by people whose own character had been forged through similar trials, creating relationships that would endure whatever tests the future might bring. The voices beyond the veil had promised that love and consciousness could survive even death itself, that the bonds formed through shared struggle and mutual sacrifice were stronger than any force that evil could deploy against them. As darkness gathered across the magical world and ordinary people prepared to make choices that would determine the fate of civilization itself, Luna carried within herself the certainty that she had found her place and her people, that the search for belonging that had begun with her arrival at Hogwarts had led her to discoveries more valuable than any treasure that conventional success could provide. The summer following Dumbledore's death brought changes to the magical world that seemed to seep through the very air like poison, transforming familiar landscapes into territories where danger lurked behind every seemingly innocent interaction, and trust became a luxury that few could afford without risking everything they held dear. The comfortable assumptions that had governed wizarding society for decades were crumbling under the weight of Voldemort's return and the systematic corruption of institutions that ordinary people had relied upon for protection and guidance, creating an atmosphere where even the most mundane activities carried potential for catastrophic consequences. In the peculiar house that rose like a black rook against the rolling hills of Ottery Street Catchpole, Xenophilius Lovegood sat at his cluttered desk, composing articles that would transform the Quibbler from eccentric publication into essential source of resistance information for anyone brave enough to seek truth in an era when official channels offered only propaganda and misdirection. His daughter, Luna, watched from the kitchen window as he worked through the night by candlelight, understanding that her father's commitment to supporting Harry Potter through the pages of his magazine was placing their entire family at risk of retaliation from forces that showed no mercy to those who challenged their authority. The articles that emerged from Xenophilius's fevered dedication were unlike anything the Quibbler had ever published, combining his trademark willingness to explore unconventional theories with urgent political commentary that made explicit connections between Voldemort's rise and the corruption that had infected the Ministry of Magic at its highest levels. Each issue carried messages that were simultaneously coded for security purposes and crystal clear in their meaning. Anyone who opposed the Dark Lord should consider helping Harry Potter their absolute priority, regardless of personal cost or official discouragement. Harry Potter, the Chosen One, read one headline that managed to convey both information and inspiration, while maintaining enough ambiguity to avoid immediate censorship by ministry officials who were still attempting to maintain facades of normalcy and democratic governance. The articles that followed provided detailed analysis of prophecy and magical theory that supported Harry's role as potential savior, while also offering practical advice for readers who wanted to contribute to resistance efforts without attracting deadly attention from Death Eater enforcement squads. Luna understood better than most the courage that her father's editorial choices required, as she had witnessed firsthand the kinds of violence that Voldemort's followers were willing to employ against anyone who threatened their plans for magical world domination. The Battle of the Department of Mysteries had provided her with education in Death Eater methods that no classroom instruction could have matched, showing her how quickly civilized behavior could dissolve when confronted by organized evil that acknowledged no moral constraints or legal limitations. But Xenophilius's commitment to truth and justice ran deeper than political calculation or personal safety concerns. Rooted in values that had been shaped by years of investigating mysteries that others preferred to ignore, and defending positions that conventional wisdom dismissed as impossible or irrelevant. His love for his daughter and his memory of his wife, combined with professional integrity and moral conviction, to create dedication that could not be swayed by threats or intimidation, even when those threats came from sources with demonstrated willingness to follow through on their promises of violence. The return journey to Hogwarts for Luna's 6th year revealed immediately that the school she had known and loved was being transformed into something that bore only superficial resemblance to the institution that had educated generations of witches and wizards in traditions of learning and ethical development. The Death Eater professors who had been installed to replace faculty who had fled or been eliminated brought with them approaches to education that were designed to break student spirit and eliminate independent thought rather than encourage the kind of critical thinking that had always been Hogwarts' greatest strength. Amicus and Electo Caro represented the worst aspects of authoritarian education, combining genuine magical knowledge with sadistic pleasure in inflicting psychological and physical pain on students who failed to meet their expectations or showed signs of resistance to the new order being imposed throughout the Mai Castle. Their classes became exercises in indoctrination and intimidation, designed to teach submission to authority rather than mastery of magical arts, creating an atmosphere of fear that poisoned the entire educational environment. Luna's response to these changes was characteristically direct and uncompromising, as she refused to allow the presence of evil to alter her fundamental commitment to remaining true to her authentic self, while contributing meaningfully to causes larger than her personal comfort or safety. The courage that had enabled her to fight Death Eaters in the Ministry building was channeled into daily acts of resistance that challenged the new regime's attempts to remake Hogwarts in its own twisted image. The reformation of Dumbledore's army, under her joint leadership with Ginny Weasley and Neville Longbottom, represented more than nostalgic attempt to recreate previous success, but strategic response to circumstances that demanded organized resistance from people who understood both the stakes involved and the methods necessary for effective opposition. The three students brought different strengths to their collaborative leadership: Neville's growing confidence and tactical awareness, Ginny's fierce determination and family connections, and Luna's unique insights and unshakable moral clarity. The enchanted coins that had once provided communication for voluntary defense training now served as lifelines connecting students who were isolated by fear and suspicious surveillance, creating networks of mutual support and coordinated action that the Caro siblings' authoritarian methods could not detect or prevent. The magic involved in maintaining these communications required constant vigilance and creative adaptation, as Death Eater security measures evolved to counter resistance activities that became more sophisticated and daring with each passing week. The messages that passed between Dumbledore's army members were necessarily brief and coded, but they carried emotional weight that far exceeded their literal content, providing reassurance that resistance was possible and solidarity was available for those brave enough to risk everything in defense of values that the new regime sought to destroy. A simple phrase about meeting for study group or extra practice could mobilize dozens of students for operations that ranged from intelligence gathering to direct confrontation with authority figures who had betrayed their educational responsibilities. The graffiti campaigns that announced Dumbledore's army still recruiting represented psychological warfare as much as practical advertisement, demonstrating to students and faculty alike that the spirit of resistance could not be eliminated through intimidation or violence. The words appeared overnight in locations that should have been impossible to access, painted in colors that seemed to glow with their own internal light, created through techniques that combined traditional magic with innovative applications that reflected the creativity that tyranny could suppress but never completely destroy. Each appearance of these messages sent shockwaves through the administrative hierarchy, proving that security measures were inadequate and resistance networks were more extensive than official assessments had suggested. The Caros would respond with increasingly harsh punishments and invasive surveillance methods, but their efforts only served to demonstrate the futility of attempting to control people whose commitment to freedom exceeded their fear of consequences. The attempt to steal the Sword of Gryffindor from the headmaster's office represented the kind of bold operation that required perfect coordination between individuals whose different backgrounds and capabilities had to be integrated into a unified action plan. The sword itself was more than valuable artifact, but symbol of everything that Hogwarts had once represented: courage in service of justice, excellence pursued for noble purposes, and willingness to take risks when circumstances demanded decisive action. Snape's occupation of the headmaster's office transformed the space that had once been sanctuary of wisdom and benevolent authority into fortress of suspicion and harsh judgment. But it also provided resistance fighters with target whose psychological significance exceeded its practical value. Stealing the sword would accomplish multiple objectives simultaneously, acquiring a weapon that possessed unique properties for fighting dark magic, striking a blow against enemy morale, and demonstrating that even the most heavily protected locations were vulnerable to determined assault by people willing to pay necessary prices for success. The planning required for such an operation tested every skill that Luna had developed during her years of unusual education and dangerous experience, as the mission demanded integration of theoretical knowledge about castle security, practical understanding of concealment and detection spells, and psychological insights into enemy behavior patterns and response procedures. The three leaders had to coordinate their individual strengths while compensating for each other's limitations, creating operational framework that could adapt to changing circumstances without losing sight of primary objectives. The infiltration itself required moving through areas of the castle that were normally forbidden to students while avoiding magical and human surveillance systems that had been enhanced specifically to prevent exactly this type of unauthorized activity. Luna's experience with creatures and magical phenomena that existed at the edges of normal perception proved invaluable for detecting threats that conventional security training might have missed, while her ability to remain calm under pressure provided stabilizing influence when unexpected challenges threatened to derail carefully laid plans. The discovery and capture that ended their mission represented failure in immediate tactical terms, but it also served strategic purposes by demonstrating to other students that resistance was possible and by forcing the Death Eater administration to reveal the harsh methods they were prepared to use against anyone who challenged their authority. The punishment that followed, detention in the Forbidden Forest with Hagrid, was intended to be a terrifying experience that would discourage future resistance activities through example of consequences that awaited those foolish enough to oppose the new order. But the Carrows had fundamentally misunderstood both their prisoners and their chosen punishment, as detention with Hagrid in the Forbidden Forest was more like reward than penalty for students who had grown up exploring magical mysteries and seeking encounters with creatures that most people found too dangerous or strange to approach. Willingly, the half-giant's presence provided protection and guidance that transformed potentially deadly expedition into educational adventure, allowing the three resistance leaders to strengthen their bonds while learning about magical phenomena that formal curriculum had never covered. The conversations that took place during their forest detention revealed the depth of commitment and understanding that had developed between Luna, Neville, and Ginny through their shared experiences of danger and discovery. Away from the oppressive atmosphere of the castle and the constant surveillance of hostile authority figures, they could speak freely about their motivations and fears, their hopes for the future, and their willingness to sacrifice personal safety for causes that transcended individual concerns. Hagrid's stories about the creatures that lived in the forest's depths provided more than entertainment but practical education about magical beings whose assistance might prove valuable in future operations. while his obvious affection for students who were brave enough to stand against tyranny offered emotional support that was becoming increasingly rare within the castle walls. The gentle giant understood better than most the courage required to maintain hope in dark times, and his presence reminded them that they were not alone in their commitment to preserving values that evil sought to destroy. The Christmas holidays brought new dangers as Luna prepared to return home to her father, knowing that the Quibbler's increasingly bold editorial stance had made their family primary targets for Death Eater retaliation. The articles supporting Harry Potter and exposing ministry corruption had created a situation where simple association with the Lovegood name carried risks that extended far beyond social disapproval or professional consequences to encompass threats of imprisonment, torture, and death. The train journey home provided Luna with final moments of relative safety before entering territory where her father's courage and principle had created enemies whose patience was rapidly approaching its limits. She understood that the comfortable routine of traveling between school and home had been permanently altered by circumstances that made every familiar activity potentially dangerous. But she also recognized that some battles could only be fought by people willing to accept whatever costs were demanded by their commitment to truth and justice. The Death Eaters who stopped the train were not random criminals seeking easy victims, but organized operatives conducting systematic search for specific individuals whose activities had attracted hostile attention from the highest levels of Voldemort's organization. Their methods combined bureaucratic efficiency with casual brutality, demonstrating how thoroughly they had infiltrated transportation systems and administrative structures that ordinary people depended upon for basic services and protection. Luna's capture represented culmination of months of escalating tension between her family's principled resistance and the Death Eater enforcement apparatus, but it also marked beginning of new phase in her education about the true nature of evil and the psychological resources necessary for survival under conditions of extreme duress. The girl who had learned about courage through academic study and controlled practice was about to discover what such abstract concepts meant when applied to situations where failure carried ultimate consequences. The basement of Malfoy Manor where she was imprisoned bore no resemblance to the comfortable dungeon cells that students joked about during detention assignments, but represented carefully designed environment for breaking the spirits of people whose continued resistance posed threats to Death Eater plans for magical world domination. The space was more than simple confinement but psychological warfare tool, created to isolate prisoners from external support while subjecting them to conditions that would gradually erode their ability to maintain hope or dignity. Garrick Ollivander's presence in the adjacent cell provided Luna with companion whose own suffering had been extended over months of imprisonment and interrogation, but whose essential humanity had somehow survived experiences that would have destroyed less resilient spirits. The legendary wandmaker's gratitude for her companionship revealed how precious simple human kindness became under circumstances where cruelty was systematic policy rather than occasional aberration. "You were an inexpressible comfort to me in that terrible place," Ollivander would later tell her, his words carrying weight that formal expressions of gratitude could never convey. The comfort she provided came not from elaborate plans or dramatic gestures, but from her fundamental refusal to allow imprisonment to change her essential nature, her determination to remain Luna Lovegood even when every external pressure sought to transform her into something fearful and broken. The months of captivity tested every lesson her parents had taught her about maintaining authentic identity under pressure, about finding sources of strength that could not be taken away by external force or intimidation. The philosophical approach to suffering that she had developed through her mother's death proved invaluable for processing experiences that challenged basic assumptions about justice and meaning. allowing her to maintain psychological equilibrium when others might have succumbed to despair or madness. Her father's desperate situation during this period revealed the terrible choices that love could impose on people whose principles conflicted with their desire to protect those they cherished above all else. Xenophilius's decision to contact the ministry with offers to trade Harry Potter for Luna's freedom represented betrayal of everything he had claimed to believe. But it also demonstrated the lengths to which devoted parents would go when faced with their children's suffering. They were angry, you see. He would explain later with voice that shook with guilt and grief. I'd been writing things. They took my Luna, and I don't know where she is, what they've done to her. But they might give her back. They might give her back if I... The words trailed off, because completing the sentence would require acknowledging that love had made him willing to sacrifice Harry Potter, the young man he had championed through his publication, in exchange for his daughter's safety. The destruction of the Lovegood home during Harry's visit represented more than collateral damage, but deliberate demonstration of what happened to families who challenged Death Eater authority, even when their resistance came through legal publications and peaceful advocacy, rather than violent confrontation. The erumpent horn that Xenophilius had believed was Crumplehorn's Snorkack artifact provided explosive power that reduced years of accumulated memories and possessions to rubble and ash, symbolizing how completely evil could destroy the foundations of ordinary life. But even as her childhood home disappeared in magical explosion that erased physical evidence of the love and wisdom that had shaped her character, Luna understood that the truly important elements of her heritage could not be destroyed by external force, because they had become integrated parts of her identity that would survive whatever trials lay ahead. The values her parents had instilled, the knowledge they had shared, the love they had expressed, these existed beyond the reach of Death Eater violence because they lived within her consciousness and would continue to influence her choices, regardless of what physical destruction occurred around her. The rescue that finally came represented convergence of circumstances that even Luna's faith in underlying patterns and hidden connections could not have predicted, as Harry Potter's own capture and subsequent escape created opportunity for liberation that pure planning could never have achieved. The appearance of her friends in Malfoy Manor's basement felt like miraculous intervention, but Luna understood that miracles were simply the visible manifestations of invisible forces that operated according to laws more complex than normal human understanding could grasp. The months of imprisonment had changed her in ways both subtle and profound, deepening her appreciation for freedom and friendship while reinforcing her commitment to causes that transcended personal comfort or safety. The girl who emerged from the basement was still recognizably Luna Lovegood, but she was also someone who had been tested under extreme conditions and had proven that her principles were more than abstract ideals, but practical guides for behavior that could sustain her through any trial that evil might devise. The foundation had been laid for everything that would follow. As the magical world moved toward final confrontation between forces of light and darkness, between those who valued freedom and those who sought domination through fear and violence, Luna's role in that approaching battle would draw upon every lesson she had learned during her months of resistance and imprisonment, every insight gained through suffering that had been endured without surrender or compromise of essential values. The girl who had once seemed to exist on the margins of important events had been shaped by circumstances into someone whose wisdom and courage would prove essential when ordinary methods failed and desperate situations required responses that conventional thinking could never provide. The dance with darkness had tested her strength and found it sufficient for whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever prices the final victory might demand from those brave enough to pay them. The basement of Malfoy Manor existed as a testament to the casual cruelty that marked every aspect of Death Eater philosophy, a space deliberately designed to strip prisoners of dignity and hope while subjecting them to conditions that would gradually erode their ability to maintain psychological coherence under prolonged stress. The stone walls wept with dampness that carried more than moisture, but the accumulated despair of countless victims who had been brought here to suffer in darkness, their screams and pleas absorbed into ancient stones that had witnessed centuries of Malfoy family crimes against humanity and decency. Luna Lovegood descended into this realm of calculated suffering with the same dreamy composure that had characterized her response to every other challenge life had presented, though the circumstances that brought her here represented a level of evil that even her unconventional education had never fully prepared her to encounter. The Death Eaters who escorted her down the narrow stone steps made no attempt to conceal their satisfaction at capturing someone whose father's publications had caused them significant inconvenience. Their casual comments about future interrogation methods designed to create psychological pressure before physical torment began. But where other prisoners might have been paralyzed by fear or driven to desperate attempts at escape that would only have resulted in additional punishment, Luna approached her imprisonment with the analytical detachment that had always been her method for processing experiences that exceeded normal categories of understanding. The basement was simply another environment to be observed and understood, its dangers noted and catalogued, but not allowed to overwhelm her capacity for clear thinking and strategic planning. The cell they assigned her was a masterpiece of deliberate degradation, its dimensions carefully calculated to prevent comfortable rest, while offering just enough space to create false hope of eventual relief from cramped confinement. The walls were covered with a slime that seemed to move independently of air currents, creating visual distortions that would gradually undermine any prisoner's confidence in their sensory perceptions, while the floor was designed with subtle irregularities that made walking treacherous and standing for extended periods almost impossibly uncomfortable. Garrick Ollivander's presence in the adjacent cell provided Luna with immediate confirmation that she was not the first person whose activities had attracted Death Eater attention, but his condition also revealed what months of imprisonment under these circumstances could accomplish in terms of breaking down even the strongest personalities. The legendary wand-maker who had once commanded respect throughout the magical world had been reduced to a trembling shadow of his former self, his once proud bearing replaced by the cowering posture of someone who had learned to expect pain from every interaction with his captors. Yet beneath the surface trauma and obvious physical deterioration, Ollivander retained enough of his essential humanity to recognize and appreciate the gift that Luna's presence represented in their shared darkness. Her refusal to allow circumstances to alter her fundamental nature provided him with something he had not experienced since his capture, the simple comfort of human companionship that was not based on power dynamics or the infliction of suffering, but on mutual recognition of worth and dignity. That imprisonment could diminish, but never completely destroy. "My dear," he whispered during their first night together, his voice barely audible through the enchanted bars that separated their cells. "How extraordinary to find someone who can maintain such composure in this terrible place. Your presence brings light where I had begun to believe only darkness could exist." His gratitude was profound and immediate, as if Luna's arrival had restored possibilities for hope that months of solitary confinement had gradually eroded. Luna's response was characteristically direct and practical, focusing not on their shared misfortune but on the opportunities that even imprisonment might provide for learning and growth. She understood intuitively that despair was a luxury neither of them could afford when survival depended on maintaining mental clarity and emotional equilibrium, despite every external pressure designed to produce exactly the opposite effects. "We must look after each other," she said with the matter-of-fact certainty that had always marked her approach to crisis situations. "And remember that this situation is temporary. even if we cannot see how it will end. My father taught me that the most important discoveries often come from observing carefully what others miss because they are too frightened or too angry to see clearly. The daily routine that developed between them represented a form of psychological resistance that their captors could not prevent or punish directly, as it consisted primarily of conversations and shared observations that maintained their connection to intellectual life and emotional warmth despite the dehumanizing conditions that surrounded them. They discussed magical theory and wand lore, sharing knowledge that provided mental stimulation while also serving as subtle form of defiance against efforts to reduce them to mere objects of experimentation and intimidation. Ollivander's expertise in wandcraft provided Luna with insights into magical theory that even her unconventional education had never covered, while her unique perspective on creature behavior and natural magic offered him fresh approaches to understanding phenomena that decades of professional experience had made seem routine and predictable. Their exchanges became collaborative investigations that transformed their cell from prison into impromptu laboratory, where ideas could be tested and refined despite the absence of books or equipment. The interrogation sessions that punctuated their imprisonment revealed the specific information that their captors hoped to extract, but they also demonstrated the limits of what torture could accomplish against people whose commitment to their values exceeded their attachment to physical comfort or personal safety. Luna's sessions were particularly challenging for her interrogators, as her tendency to provide literally accurate but practically useless answers frustrated Death Eaters who expected either immediate compliance or satisfying displays of fear and submission. When asked about her father's sources for information published in the Quibbler, Luna would cheerfully explain that Xenophilius relied primarily on reader letters and personal research, providing technically correct responses that revealed nothing about specific individuals or communication methods that might be used to track resistance activities. Her apparent cooperation masked sophisticated understanding of how to protect valuable information while avoiding additional punishment for obvious defiance or deception. Her discussions of Harry Potter and his activities were similarly designed to satisfy questioners without providing intelligence that could be used to harm the resistance movement or compromise ongoing operations. She would share well-known information about Harry's school career and public appearances while claiming ignorance about current whereabouts or future plans, maintaining the fiction that their friendship was casual rather than the deep bond that had been forged through shared danger and mutual respect. The psychological techniques employed by Death Eater interrogators reflected sophisticated understanding of human weakness and the methods most likely to break down resistance over extended periods, but they also revealed the limitations that evil imposed on its own effectiveness through over-reliance on fear and violence as primary motivational tools. Luna's responses demonstrated that people whose sense of worth was not dependent on external validation were far more difficult to manipulate than those whose identities were built on social approval and conventional success. The months that passed in captivity were marked not by gradual deterioration but by deepening appreciation for freedoms and relationships that Luna had previously taken for granted, as imprisonment provided perspective on what truly mattered when everything else was stripped away by force. The simple pleasure of choosing when to sleep or what to think about became precious luxuries, while memories of friends and family took on significance that comfortable circumstances had never allowed her to recognize. Her dreams during this period were filled with images of the painted ceiling in her bedroom at home, where the faces of her friends smiled down surrounded by golden chains that spelled out friendship in endless repetition. The memory of that artwork became more than sentimental comfort but practical reminder that love and loyalty created connections stronger than physical walls or magical barriers. bonds that imprisonment could stretch but never break entirely. The news that filtered down through overheard conversations between guards and the occasional new prisoner revealed the scope of changes that were reshaping the magical world during her captivity, as Voldemort's influence spread through institutions that had once seemed secure and permanent. The systematic elimination of resistance fighters and the installation of Death Eater loyalists in positions of authority demonstrated how quickly civilized society could collapse when evil was organized and determined while good remained, fragmented and reactive. But the same conversations that revealed the extent of Death Eater success also provided evidence that resistance continued despite official suppression and violent retaliation, as reports of sabotage operations and underground networks suggested that many people were refusing to accept the new order despite the obvious personal risks involved. Luna drew strength from these glimpses of ongoing defiance, understanding that her own imprisonment was part of a larger pattern of suffering that was being endured by people throughout the magical world who shared her commitment to values that tyranny could never completely destroy. Her father's situation during this period represented the kind of moral dilemma that war imposed on ordinary people, whose love for family members created conflicts with broader ethical commitments, as Xenophilius faced impossible choices between protecting his daughter and maintaining his principles. The articles in the Quibbler that had made Luna a target had also established her father as someone whose integrity could not be purchased or intimidated, but that same integrity became a weapon that Death Eaters could use against him through threats to harm the person he cared about most. The letters that occasionally reached Luna through corrupted prison guards revealed Xenophilius's increasing desperation and the psychological pressure that her captivity was placing on someone whose entire adult life had been built around protecting and nurturing the daughter who had become his primary reason for continuing after his wife's death. His writing showed growing willingness to consider compromises that would once have been unthinkable, bargains that might secure Luna's freedom at costs that his former self would have rejected without hesitation. They say they might let you come home if I provide certain information. One letter revealed, the words trembling with hope and shame in equal measure. I know what you would say about principles and standing firm against evil. But principles seem less important when you are suffering and I cannot reach you. Please forgive me if I make choices that disappoint the values we have shared. But losing you would destroy everything that gives my life meaning. Luna's response, when she was occasionally permitted to send messages home, focused on providing comfort and reassurance rather than moral guidance, understanding that her father's struggle was more complex than simple choice between right and wrong. She wrote about the knowledge she was gaining through conversations with Ollivander, the perspective that imprisonment was providing on what truly mattered in life, and her faith that their separation was temporary, even if she could not predict exactly how it would end. Do not worry about disappointing me, Daddy, she wrote in one letter that brought tears to Xenophilius's eyes when he read it by candlelight in his destroyed home. You have given me everything I need to survive whatever happens. And I understand that love sometimes requires choices that logic cannot solve. Trust that we will be together again when the time is right. And remember that the most important lessons are learned not from success, but from enduring difficulty without losing hope. The destruction of the Lovegood home that occurred during Harry Potter's visit represented the final elimination of Luna's childhood refuge, the space where she had first learned to see magic in everyday objects and find wonder in seemingly impossible possibilities. The explosion that reduced years of accumulated memories to rubble and ash was visible from the manor's barred windows, creating a pillar of fire and smoke that marked the end of one chapter in her life and the beginning of whatever would follow. But even as she watched her physical heritage disappear in flames and magical destruction, Luna understood that the truly important elements of her upbringing had already been internalized and could not be destroyed by external force. The love her parents had shared, the knowledge they had imparted, the values they had demonstrated through their choices, these existed independently of any building or collection of possessions, surviving as integral parts of her identity that would influence her behavior regardless of what material losses she might suffer. The rescue that finally came was preceded by sounds of magical combat that suggested the manor's defenses were being challenged by forces whose power exceeded anything Death Eater security measures had been designed to repel. The vibrations that shook the foundation stones and the flashes of colored light that penetrated even the basement's heavy enchantments created hope that Luna had been careful not to nurture during her months of captivity, as disappointment would have been more devastating than continued acceptance of indefinite imprisonment. The appearance of Harry Potter, Ron Weasley, and Hermione Granger in their underground prison felt like manifestation of dreams that Luna had not dared to indulge, proof that friendship could overcome obstacles that seemed insurmountable through individual effort. But their presence also meant that her rescue had come at significant cost to her friends, who had risked their own lives and mission objectives to save someone whose capture had been consequence of her family's principled resistance to Death Eater authority. The house elf Dobby's sacrifice during their escape provided Luna with profound lesson about the nature of heroism and the prices that freedom sometimes demanded from those brave enough to pay them. His death represented the ultimate expression of values that Luna had been raised to cherish: willingness to place others' welfare above personal safety, commitment to justice that transcended species, boundaries, and social hierarchies, and faith in possibilities for redemption and growth that conventional wisdom dismissed as naive fantasy. Her response to Dobby's death reflected the emotional maturity that months of imprisonment had fostered, as she approached his body with tenderness that honored his sacrifice, while also acknowledging the reality of loss that could not be undone through wishing or hoping. The gesture of closing his eyes was simple but profound, providing dignity for someone who had lived most of his life without receiving recognition for his essential worth and goodness. There, now he could be sleeping, she said softly, her words transforming the scene from tragedy into something approaching peace. The observation was characteristic of Luna's ability to find meaning and beauty, even in circumstances that others would consider purely sorrowful. Her refusal to allow death to diminish her appreciation for the life that had preceded it. The funeral speech that followed demonstrated Luna's understanding that mourning was not passive acceptance of loss, but active celebration of what had been accomplished and achieved during the time that was given. Her words honored Dobby's courage and kindness, while also providing comfort for those whose grief threatened to overwhelm their capacity for continued action in service of causes that his sacrifice had advanced. "Thank you so much, Dobby, for rescuing me from that cellar. It's so unfair that you had to die when you were so good and brave. I'll always remember what you did for us. I hope you're happy now." The speech was brief but complete, acknowledging both the injustice of his death and the meaning that his life had possessed, the unfairness of loss, and the importance of remembering those who had paid ultimate prices for others' freedom. The new wand that Ollivander created for her as token of gratitude for her companionship during their shared imprisonment was more than replacement for magical equipment that had been confiscated by Death Eater captors, but symbol of renewal and return to active participation in the struggle that would determine the magical world's future. The wand maker's skill had not been diminished by months of torture and deprivation, and his gift represented both personal appreciation and professional recognition of Luna's worthiness to carry instruments capable of channeling the most powerful forms of beneficial magic. Shell Cottage, where she spent her final weeks before the Battle of Hogwarts, provided opportunity for recovery and reflection that allowed Luna to process her experiences of captivity while preparing for challenges that would test every lesson she had learned about courage and loyalty. The peaceful environment created by Bill and Fleur Weasley offered respite from months of constant stress and danger, but Luna understood that such peace was temporary sanctuary rather than permanent retreat from responsibilities that awaited her return to active service. The conversations with other refugees who had gathered at the cottage revealed the scope of suffering that Voldemort's regime had inflicted throughout the magical world, but they also demonstrated the resilience and determination that evil could never completely crush in people whose commitment to justice exceeded their attachment to personal comfort and safety. Each story of loss and survival contributed to Luna's understanding of what was at stake in the approaching final battle and what sacrifices would be required from everyone who chose to stand against darkness. Her time at Shell Cottage was marked by gradual healing of wounds that were more psychological than physical, as the safety and kindness she encountered allowed her to begin processing traumas that had been endured through necessity, but never fully integrated into her understanding of herself and her capabilities. The discovery that she could survive months of imprisonment without losing her essential identity or abandoning her core values provided confidence that would prove essential in the trials ahead. The message that finally came through the Dumbledore's army coin, announcing Harry Potter's return to Hogwarts and the beginning of the final confrontation with Voldemort, found Luna ready to rejoin the fight that had shaped her adolescence and defined her character through years of increasing challenge and danger. The girl who had once seemed to exist on the margins of important events had been tested under the most extreme conditions and had proven herself worthy of trust and capable of contributions that conventional expectations could never have predicted. The journey back to Hogwarts represented completion of circle that had begun with her arrival as uncertain first-year student, whose unusual perspectives had marked her as different from her peers. Continuing through years of gradual acceptance and growing confidence, reaching climax in imprisonment that had tested every lesson her parents had taught her about maintaining authenticity under pressure. Now she returned as seasoned veteran of resistance activities, someone whose wisdom had been earned through suffering and whose courage had been proven through trials that would have broken lesser spirits. The castle that awaited her bore scars from months of Death Eater occupation, but it remained fundamentally the same institution that had provided her with education and friendship, community and purpose during the most formative years of her life. The approaching battle would determine whether Hogwarts would continue to exist as beacon of learning and hope, or whether it would be transformed into monument to tyranny and fear. But Luna understood that some battles were worth fighting regardless of their outcomes, that some values deserved defense, even when victory seemed impossible. The months of imprisonment had prepared her for whatever the final confrontation might demand, teaching lessons about endurance and hope that no classroom instruction could have provided. She had discovered reservoirs of strength that she had never suspected existed, capabilities that emerged only when circumstances left no alternatives except surrender or resistance. The dance with darkness had tested her character and found it sufficient for whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever prices the approaching victory might demand from those brave enough to pay them. The ancient stones of Hogwarts Castle bore witness to transformations that seemed to defy the natural order itself, as magic and malice combined to reshape corridors that had once echoed with laughter and learning into battlegrounds, where the fundamental questions of good and evil would be resolved through violence that transcended anything the blank-tomed school's founders could have imagined when they first raised These walls from Scottish soil, the very air seemed charged with approaching destiny, as if centuries of accumulated magic were gathering their strength for conflicts that would determine whether the castle would continue to exist as sanctuary of knowledge and hope, or be transformed into monument to tyranny and despair. Luna Lovegood's return to this transformed landscape came not through the familiar routine of term-time arrival, but as part of desperate response to messages that had traveled through enchanted coins to reach resistance fighters, scattered across a magical world where ordinary communication had become impossibly dangerous. The Dumbledore's army coin that had remained silent for so many months suddenly blazed with warmth and urgency, carrying Harry Potter's summons to all who remembered their oaths and retained courage necessary for final confrontation with forces that sought to destroy everything they had learned to value. The castle that greeted her bore scars from months of Death Eater occupation that went far deeper than architectural damage, as the very atmosphere had been poisoned by systematic cruelty and deliberate corruption of educational mission that had defined Hogwarts for 1,000 years. The corridors where she had once wandered in dreamy contemplation now pulsed with malevolent energy that made her enhanced magical perception ache with recognition of how thoroughly evil could infect spaces that had been created for entirely opposite purposes. But beneath the surface, corruption and obvious signs of institutional decay, Luna could still sense the fundamental goodness that centuries of dedicated teaching and learning had woven into the castle's magical foundation. The stones themselves remembered better times and better purposes, and their accumulated wisdom provided strength that Death Eater influence could diminish but never completely destroy. This was still Hogwarts, still the place where she had learned what it meant to find friendship and discover her own capacity for courage, and that essential identity remained intact despite every attempt to remake it in evil's image. Dean Thomas's presence beside her, as they approached the castle, provided tangible reminder of how imprisonment and shared suffering had created bonds that transcended the superficial differences that had once seemed so important. During their school years, their escape from Malfoy Manor had forged connection between them that was based not on common interests or compatible personalities, but on mutual recognition of what it meant to survive experiences that revealed both human cruelty and human resilience in their most extreme forms. The room of requirement that welcomed them had transformed itself into headquarters for resistance activities that combined military necessity with emotional needs of people who had been separated from friends and family for months of dangerous uncertainty. The space had become sanctuary where exhausted fighters could find rest and sustenance while planning operations that would require everything they possessed in terms of magical ability and personal courage, a place where individual fears could be acknowledged and shared without compromising collective determination to see the struggle through to its conclusion. The reunion with friends who had become more precious than family during years of shared adventure and increasing danger provided Luna with confirmation that the bonds they had forged were strong enough to survive any test that circumstances might devise. Harry's embrace carried weight of gratitude for sacrifices made and relief at finding her alive and essentially unchanged, despite months of imprisonment that would have broken weaker spirits, while Hermione's tears revealed depths of affection that academic competitiveness and personality differences had never been able to diminish completely. Ron's reaction to seeing her again demonstrated how much his understanding and appreciation of her unique qualities had developed during their separation, as he no longer saw her strangeness as amusing eccentricity, but as evidence of wisdom and perception that conventional thinking could never match. His awkward attempts at conversation revealed genuine concern for her well-being, combined with recognition that she had endured experiences that exceeded anything in his own background, creating a combination of respect and protective instinct that marked his psychological growth from adolescent to adult. Neville's transformation, during the months of resistance leadership was immediately apparent to Luna's enhanced perception, as she recognized in him someone whose inner strength had finally found external expression through circumstances that demanded heroism from people who had never considered themselves heroic material. The boy who had once struggled with basic spells and simple self-confidence had evolved into a young man whose courage and tactical intelligence had inspired others to continue fighting when surrender would have been easier and safer than persistent resistance. Ginny's presence completed the reunion of core friendships that had sustained Luna through the darkest periods of her captivity, providing confirmation that their bonds were strong enough to survive separation and suffering that might have destroyed relationships based on less fundamental connections. The fierce joy that lit Ginny's face when she saw Luna alive and unbroken revealed depths of sisterly affection that went far beyond normal school friendships to encompass the kind of loyalty that would endure whatever trials the future might bring. The intelligence that Harry sought about Rowena Ravenclaw's diadem represented exactly the kind of challenge that Luna's unconventional education and unique perspective were perfectly suited to address. As conventional research methods had failed to locate an artifact whose hiding place required insight into psychological patterns and symbolic thinking that academic scholarship rarely considered seriously. Her knowledge of Ravenclaw house traditions and her intuitive understanding of how brilliant minds approached problems of concealment gave her advantages that formal expertise could not duplicate. "Well, there's Rowena Ravenclaw's lost diadem," she said with the matter-of-fact certainty that had always characterized her responses to questions that others found impossibly difficult. "I've never seen anyone wearing it, though. Lost? You know." Her casual reference to one of the magical world's greatest mysteries demonstrated both her encyclopedic knowledge of magical history and her ability to treat legendary artifacts as concrete objects that simply happen to be temporarily misplaced rather than lost forever. The expedition to Ravenclaw Tower that followed provided Luna with opportunity to share knowledge that even most Ravenclaw students had never encountered, as her years of exploring the castle's hidden spaces and investigating its historical mysteries had given her access to information that was not recorded in any textbook or official school history. The bronze eagle that guarded the common room entrance posed riddles that required not just intelligence, but creativity and willingness to consider possibilities that conventional logic might dismiss as irrelevant or impossible. The riddle that confronted them: which came first, the phoenix or the flame, represented exactly the kind of paradoxical question that Luna's unique perspective was designed to illuminate, as her understanding of magical theory and creature behavior provided insights that purely rational analysis could never achieve. Her response revealed sophisticated grasp of philosophical principles, combined with practical knowledge that transformed abstract speculation into concrete understanding applicable to immediate circumstances. "A circle has no beginning," she answered with serene confidence, demonstrating that wisdom sometimes came not from choosing between apparent alternatives, but from recognizing that the question itself was based on false assumptions about the nature of causation and temporal relationships. The eagle's acceptance of her response provided validation that unconventional thinking could solve problems that defeated more traditional approaches to intellectual challenge. The common room that they entered showed signs of Death Eater occupation that went beyond simple vandalism to encompass systematic destruction of everything that made Ravenclaw House distinctive and valuable. As books had been burned and artifacts shattered in deliberate campaign to eliminate sources of knowledge and inspiration that might fuel continued resistance to authoritarian control. But the damage was superficial compared to the accumulated wisdom that had been woven into the room's magical infrastructure over centuries of scholarly dedication and intellectual achievement. The statue of Rowena Ravenclaw that dominated the space had survived Death Eater vandalism through protective enchantments that reflected not just the founder's magical power, but the love and respect that generations of students and faculty had invested in preserving her legacy and the values she represented. The marble figure seemed to radiate approval as Luna approached, as if recognizing in this unusual young woman someone who truly understood what Ravenclaw House was meant to accomplish and represent. Luna's description of the diadem's appearance drew upon knowledge that she had gained not from formal research, but from careful observation of details that others had overlooked or dismissed as decorative elements without deeper significance. Her ability to visualize artifacts that she had never seen in physical form reflected the kind of imaginative reconstruction that her father's investigations had taught her to value as legitimate source of information about phenomena that existed beyond the boundaries of documented evidence. "It's sort of a crown," she explained dreamily, her eyes unfocused as she drew upon memories and insights that existed at the intersection of knowledge and intuition. "Ravenclaws, you know. Hasn't anyone ever told you? The lost diadem of Ravenclaw. Daddy's trying to get an interview with her. Well, her ghost. But she doesn't seem very keen." Her casual reference to the Grey Lady revealed connections between seemingly unrelated phenomena that more systematic investigators had failed to recognize. The arrival of Amicus Caro that interrupted their research represented exactly the kind of immediate danger that Luna had learned to handle with calm competence during her months of resistance activities and subsequent imprisonment, as Death Eater enforcement methods were familiar territory rather than terrifying unknown. Her response to his threats demonstrated psychological preparation that exceeded anything normal educational experience could have provided, showing how thoroughly she had internalized lessons about maintaining dignity and effectiveness under extreme pressure. The stunning spell that rendered her unconscious before the main battle began was administered with casual brutality that characterized Death Eater treatment of anyone who opposed their authority. But Luna's survival of the encounter reflected both physical resilience and magical protection that she had developed through years of dangerous experience and careful preparation. Her recovery in time to participate in the final phases of the conflict demonstrated determination that could overcome temporary setbacks through sheer force of will and commitment to causes larger than personal safety. The Battle of Hogwarts that erupted around them represented culmination of conflicts that had been building throughout Luna's school years. As the forces of light and darkness finally confronted each other in direct combat that would determine the magical world's future through violence that transcended normal categories of civilized conflict, the scale and intensity of the fighting exceeded anything that previous generations had experienced, as both sides committed resources and accepted casualties that reflected their understanding that this confrontation would be decisive rather than preliminary. Luna's participation in the battle drew upon every skill she had developed during her years of unconventional education and dangerous experience, as the combination of theoretical knowledge and practical application that her parents had provided proved perfectly suited for combat situations that required rapid adaptation and creative problem-solving under conditions of extreme stress. Her ability to remain calm and observant while surrounded by magical violence that would have paralyzed less prepared individuals allowed her to function effectively as both combatant and support personnel. The Dementor attack that threatened to overwhelm Harry Potter and his closest friends represented exactly the kind of crisis where Luna's unique abilities and enhanced perception could make decisive difference between victory, catastrophic defeat, as her understanding of these creatures and her psychological preparation for encounters with forces that fed on despair gave her capabilities that conventional magical training could never have developed. The situation demanded not just magical power but spiritual strength that could resist influences designed to destroy hope and paralyze will. "That's right, Harry, come on. Think of something happy." Her voice cut through the psychological fog that Dementor influence created, providing anchor to positive emotions and memories that could generate Patronus magic powerful enough to drive off creatures that had never been defeated through conventional combat methods. The encouragement she offered was more than simple moral support, but practical instruction based on deep understanding of how protective magic functioned at fundamental levels. "Something happy. We're all still here. We're still fighting. Come on now." The words she chose reflected her characteristic ability to find hope and meaning even in circumstances that seemed utterly desperate, transforming immediate survival concerns into broader recognition that their continued existence represented victory against odds that should have been insurmountable. Her perspective provided psychological strength that proved as valuable as any spell or charm in maintaining group cohesion under impossible pressure. The Patronus charm that Harry finally produced in response to her encouragement was enhanced by collective determination and shared courage that transformed individual magical ability into something approaching divine intervention, as the silver stag that emerged from his wand carried power that reflected not just personal happiness, but communal commitment to values worth defending, despite ultimate costs. The Dementor's retreat before this manifestation of pure hope demonstrated that evil's power was ultimately limited by its inability to create or inspire anything beyond fear and hatred. Seamus Finnegan and Ernie Macmillan's contribution to the defensive effort revealed how Luna's influence had spread throughout their generation of students, as her example of courage and unconventional thinking had inspired others to develop capabilities they had never suspected they possessed during normal educational routines. The Patronus charms they produced might not have matched Harry's in raw power, but they represented triumph of hope over despair that was equally significant in broader context of resistance against forces that sought to eliminate all sources of light and joy. The coordination required to maintain defensive formation against overwhelming numbers of Dementors demonstrated tactical skills that these students had developed through necessity rather than formal military training, as their experience in Dumbledore's army and subsequent resistance activities had taught them to function as unit, despite individual differences in magical ability and personal courage. Luna's role in this coordination reflected her evolution from isolated observer to essential team member whose contributions were valued and necessary for group success. The broader battle that surrounded their specific encounter with Dementors revealed scope of destruction and sacrifice that the final confrontation was demanding from everyone who chose to participate, as casualties mounted on both sides and the castle itself began to show structural damage from magical forces that exceeded anything its defenses had been designed to withstand. The ancient stones that had witnessed centuries of learning and growth were being tested by violence that threatened to destroy everything they had been created to protect and preserve. Luna's movement through the battle was characterized by same dreamy competence that had marked all her responses to crisis situations, as she navigated magical combat with combination of enhanced perception and intuitive understanding that allowed her to contribute effectively despite lacking formal military training or extensive experience with large-scale conflict. Her ability to identify threats and opportunities that others missed proved invaluable for maintaining tactical awareness in an environment where split-second decisions could determine life or death outcomes. The encounter with Bellatrix Lestrange that brought her into direct confrontation with one of Voldemort's most dangerous and unpredictable followers represented ultimate test of everything Luna had learned about courage and magical combat, as she found herself facing an opponent whose cruelty exceeded anything she had encountered during previous battles or imprisonment experiences. Bellatrix's sadistic approach to conflict created psychological as well as physical dangers that required different defensive strategies than those that had proven effective against other Death Eater opponents. The coordination with Ginny Weasley and Hermione Granger that was necessary for survival against such formidable opponent demonstrated how thoroughly their friendship had evolved into military partnership based on mutual trust and complementary abilities that could overcome individual limitations. Through collaborative effort, each young woman brought different strengths to their shared defense. Ginny's fierce determination and instinctive tactical sense, Hermione's encyclopedic knowledge and logical analysis, and Luna's enhanced perception and unconventional approaches to problem solving. The battle against Bellatrix tested every assumption they held about their own capabilities and the effectiveness of techniques they had developed through years of training and practical experience, as her combination of magical power and psychological manipulation created challenges that exceeded anything they had previously encountered, even during the most dangerous phases of their education in resistance activities. Her willingness to use unforgivable curses without hesitation forced them to develop countermeasures that pushed their abilities to absolute limits. The intervention by Molly Weasley that finally ended Bellatrix's threat provided Luna with powerful demonstration of how love and protective instinct could generate magical power that exceeded anything that hatred or ambition could produce. As the maternal fury that drove Mrs. Weasley's assault transcended normal limitations of magical ability to create force that proved unstoppable when properly focused and motivated. The lesson was profound and practical. Good could triumph over evil when it was supported by emotional commitments that evil could never understand or duplicate. The final confrontation between Harry Potter and Voldemort that ended the battle represented resolution of conflicts that had shaped Luna's entire educational experience at Hogwarts. As the boy who had first shown her that she was not alone in her ability to see hidden truths finally fulfilled destiny that had been evident from their earliest encounters. The magical duel that determined the war's outcome was visible throughout the castle, creating display of power and principle that would be remembered for centuries, as demonstration of what was possible when courage was combined with justice. Luna's witness to Voldemort's final defeat provided confirmation that the values her parents had taught her were not naive idealism but practical wisdom that could triumph over forces that seemed infinitely more powerful and ruthless when they were applied with sufficient dedication and support from others who shared similar commitments. The Dark Lord's death represented more than military victory, but vindication of everything she had believed about the fundamental nature of reality and the ultimate triumph of light over darkness. The silence that followed the battle's end was more profound than anything Luna had ever experienced, as the sudden absence of magical violence left everyone struggling to process transition from life or death combat to possibility of normal existence without constant danger and fear. The castle around them bore wounds that would take years to heal completely, but its essential identity had survived intact, ready to resume its mission of educating young witches and wizards in values that would prevent future conflicts of similar scope and destructiveness. The great hall that had once been filled with laughter and learning now served as makeshift hospital, where survivors tended wounded friends and mourned those who had paid ultimate prices for victory that could never have been achieved without their sacrifices. Luna's presence among the casualties and caregivers provided comfort that went beyond her magical abilities to encompass emotional support that helped others process trauma and loss that would affect them for remainder of their lives. Her ability to find meaning and hope, even in scenes of devastation and grief, reflected psychological strength that had been forged through years of encounter with loss and disappointment, as her early experience with her mother's death had taught her that tragedy could coexist with beauty, and that endings were often disguised. Beginnings that required patience and faith to recognize properly. The wisdom she shared during those first hours after victory helped others begin process of healing that would transform them from soldiers back into students and citizens. The recognition that she had played an essential role in achieving victory that saved the magical world from tyranny and destruction provided Luna with confirmation that her unusual perspective and unconventional abilities were not merely tolerated differences, but valuable contributions that could not have been replaced by anyone else. The girl who had once seemed to exist on margins of important events had proven herself central to outcomes that would shape history for generations to come. The foundation had been laid for whatever challenges the future might bring. As the magical world began process of rebuilding institutions and relationships that had been damaged or destroyed during years of conflict and oppression, Luna's role in that reconstruction would draw upon everything she had learned during her years of growth and trial, every insight gained through suffering that had been endured without surrender of essential values or abandonment of hope for better possibilities ahead. The Great Hall of Hogwarts in the aftermath of victory bore witness to transformations both terrible and beautiful, as dawnlight filtered through damaged windows to illuminate scenes of devastation and renewal that would forever mark the transition between the magical world's darkest hour and its emergence into possibilities that few had dared to imagine during the long years of fear and oppression. The ancient stones that had absorbed so much violence and sacrifice now seemed to pulse with quiet satisfaction, as if the castle itself understood that its essential purpose had been preserved through trials that might have destroyed institutions with less fundamental commitment to the values that made education meaningful. Luna Lovegood moved through this landscape of endings and beginnings with the same dreamy composure that had characterized her response to every previous crisis, but her enhanced perception allowed her to see details that others might have missed in their exhaustion and emotional overwhelm. The magical residue of the battle still clung to walls and furniture like invisible smoke, creating patterns that told stories of heroism and sacrifice that would take months to fade completely, while the deeper currents of accumulated blessing and protection that had always flowed through the castle were already beginning to reassert themselves against the contamination that Death Eater occupation had left behind. Her quiet assistance to Harry Potter as he struggled with the psychological aftermath of his confrontation with Voldemort represented one final service to the friendship that had sustained both of them through years of increasing danger and impossible choices, as she recognized in his haunted expression the particular exhaustion that came from bearing responsibilities that no individual should have been asked to carry alone. The boy who had been marked by prophecy and shaped by circumstance into weapon against ultimate evil now faced the challenge of discovering who he might become when that burden was finally lifted from shoulders that had carried it since childhood. The invisibility cloak that she helped him don before slipping away from the crowd provided more than simple concealment but symbolic passage between his public role as savior of the magical world and his private need for space to process experiences that would affect him for the remainder of his life. Luna understood intuitively that heroes required time away from grateful crowds to integrate what they had accomplished and decide what kind of people they wanted to be when the crisis that had defined them was finally resolved through victory that felt more like survival than triumph. "I think you've had enough of crowds for now," she said with characteristic directness, her pale eyes showing understanding that went deeper than sympathy to encompass recognition of what it meant to be thrust into roles that exceeded normal human capacity for psychological integration. Her assistance in his escape was a gift of privacy and peace that would allow healing to begin in an environment free from expectations and demands that well-meaning gratitude could impose on someone who needed solitude more than celebration. The weeks that followed the battle were marked by gradual return to routines and relationships that had been disrupted by years of conflict. But Luna's experience of this transition was complicated by awareness that the world she was returning to had been fundamentally altered by everything she had witnessed and endured during her transformation from isolated dreamer to essential participant in events that would reshape magical society for generations to come. The simple pleasures of walking through Diagon Alley without fear, or reading books without checking for dark arts contamination, felt strange and wonderful after years of constant vigilance and justified paranoia. Her return to the Quibbler's offices provided opportunity for reunion with her father that was both joyful and complex, as Xenophilius struggled with guilt over the choices he had made during her imprisonment, while Luna worked to help him understand that love could justify decisions that principle might condemn when survival of those we cherish was at stake. Their conversations during those first months after the war revealed depths of mutual forgiveness, an understanding that strengthened their bond while acknowledging how much both of them had been changed by experiences that had tested every assumption they held about courage and compromise. The magazine that they rebuilt together reflected evolution in both of their perspectives, as Luna's practical experience with the consequences of resistance activities combined with her father's theoretical knowledge to create publication that maintained its commitment to investigating unconventional phenomena while also providing practical guidance for readers who wanted to help rebuild magical society along more just and inclusive lines. The circulation that had grown during the war years continued to expand as people discovered that the Quibbler's unique approach to information gathering could illuminate aspects of post-war recovery that mainstream publications were missing or ignoring. The completion of her education at Hogwarts represented more challenge than triumph, as Luna found herself struggling to adapt to classroom routines and academic expectations that seemed almost absurdly peaceful after years of life or death stakes and constant danger. The professors who had returned to resume their teaching duties recognized that students who had participated in resistance activities and witnessed actual warfare would require different approaches to education than those whose school years had been shaped primarily by normal adolescent concerns about grades and social relationships. Professor McGonagall's particular understanding of what Luna and her peers had endured was evident in curriculum modifications that acknowledged their advanced practical knowledge while providing opportunities to fill gaps in HA, theoretical foundation that combat experience, however comprehensive, could never address completely. The transfiguration lessons that had once seemed merely academic now carried emotional weight, as Luna understood viscerally what it meant to transform one thing into another and the philosophical implications of such changes for identity and continuity over time. Her Newt examinations, when they finally took place in an atmosphere of determined normalcy, reflected capabilities that exceeded anything her earlier academic performance had suggested, as the practical experience and enhanced perception she had developed through years of dangerous adventure provided insights that purely theoretical education could never have fostered. The examiners who evaluated her work noted unusual depth of understanding combined with creative approaches to problem solving that suggested she would excel in fields that required integration of conventional knowledge with innovative applications. The career counseling sessions that followed her outstanding examination results revealed the breadth of opportunities that were available to someone whose unique combination of theoretical knowledge and practical experience had prepared her for roles that conventional educational pathways could never have anticipated. Ministry positions in creature regulation and magical research were offered, along with teaching opportunities at prestigious institutions. But Luna's interests lay in directions that formal career guidance had never considered seriously. The decision to pursue magical naturalist work as independent researcher, rather than accepting institutional employment, reflected values and priorities that her unconventional upbringing had instilled, as she understood that the most important discoveries often came from investigations that were too risky or too strange for official sponsorship, but might yield insights that could revolutionize understanding of magical worlds, fundamental principles, and unexplored possibilities. Her father's example of successful independent publishing had demonstrated that meaningful work could be accomplished without bureaucratic oversight or academic affiliation. The equipment and resources necessary for worldwide creature research were acquired through a combination of family resources and financial support from friends who recognized that Luna's investigations would benefit magical knowledge in ways that conventional academic research could never achieve. The enhanced magical devices that Hermione Granger helped design specifically for Luna's expeditions represented cutting-edge applications of theoretical principles to practical problems of detection and analysis in environments where standard equipment would prove inadequate or dangerous. The first expedition that launched her professional career took her to remote regions of Scandinavia, where reports of unusual magical creature activity had been dismissed by ministry researchers as folklore or misidentified phenomena. But Luna's investigation revealed complex ecosystems of interdependent species whose behaviors challenged accepted understanding of how magical creatures adapted to environmental pressures and human encroachment on their traditional territories. The ice dragons that she documented in Norwegian fjords were not the massive fire-breathing beasts of legend, but delicate creatures whose crystalline wings created aurora displays that had been attributed to atmospheric disturbances by Muggle scientists and dismissed as impossible by wizards, who insisted that dragon species were already completely catalogued and classified. Luna's patient observation and innovative photographic techniques provided evidence that magical evolution was an ongoing process rather than historical artifact, with new species emerging in response to changing magical fields and environmental conditions. The publication of her findings in both the Quibbler and International Magical Naturalist journals established her reputation as a researcher whose methods, while unconventional, produced results that could not be ignored by serious academics, despite their initial skepticism about investigations that seemed to validate phenomena they had dismissed as impossible or irrelevant to legitimate scientific inquiry. The controversy that surrounded her work only served to increase interest in her subsequent expeditions and the discoveries they might yield. The rackspurts that she identified in Amazon rainforest represented breakthrough in understanding of magical parasites that affected both creature and human magical systems, as Luna's detailed analysis of their life cycles and behavioral patterns provided explanation for mental confusion and magical interference that had puzzled researchers for centuries. Her development of detection and treatment methods for rackspurt infestation became standard medical practice throughout the magical world, saving countless lives and magical careers that might otherwise have been destroyed by untreatable conditions. The mountain range expedition in Tibet that followed her Amazon success brought Luna into contact with creatures whose existence straddled boundaries between physical and spiritual reality in ways that challenged conventional understanding of what constituted legitimate subjects for scientific investigation. The Thestrals variant that she discovered in high-altitude environments could only be seen by people who had not just witnessed death, but had accepted its reality as natural transition rather than tragic ending, requiring observers to achieve psychological state that few researchers were prepared to cultivate. Her documentation of these ethereal beings required development of entirely new photographic and analytical techniques that could capture phenomena existing partially outside normal dimensional boundaries, as conventional methods proved inadequate for recording creatures whose essential nature included elements that transcended physical manifestation. The theoretical implications of her discoveries extended far beyond creature classification to encompass questions about consciousness and continuity that had profound significance for magical understanding of life and death. The years of travel and research that established her international reputation were marked by discoveries that consistently challenged accepted boundaries between possible and impossible, as Luna's willingness to investigate phenomena that others dismissed as too strange or too dangerous led her to creatures and magical systems that conventional research methods could never have detected or analyzed successfully. Her publications transformed magical naturalist work from descriptive cataloging to dynamic investigation of evolutionary and adaptive processes that were still actively reshaping the magical world. The Nargles that she finally documented in New Zealand forests represented vindication of childhood beliefs that had been dismissed as fantasy, but her adult understanding of these creatures revealed complexity that exceeded even her father's theoretical speculations about their behavior and significance. Rather than simple mischief makers who stole small objects, they proved to be sophisticated, magical recyclers whose seemingly random theft patterns actually served essential ecological functions in maintaining magical balance within forest ecosystems. Her detailed analysis of Nargle's social structures and communication methods revealed intelligence that approached human levels while operating according to entirely different logical principles, as they valued objects not for their material worth but for their magical resonance and emotional significance to their previous owners. The theft that had frustrated Luna during her school years was actually a form of magical conservation, removing items whose accumulated emotional energy was disrupting natural magical flows in ways that could have caused environmental damage if left unchecked. The protective talismans that she developed based on her understanding of Nargle behavior became popular throughout the magical world, among people who wanted to safeguard particularly precious possessions. But Luna's deeper insight was that learning to live with occasional minor losses might be a healthier approach than attempting to control every aspect of one's environment through magical or technological means. The Nargles were teachers as well as conservators, offering lessons about attachment and flexibility that had profound implications for human psychological development. The marriage proposal from Rolf Scamander that interrupted one of her research expeditions represented convergence of personal and professional interests that seemed almost impossibly perfect, as he brought to their relationship expertise in magical creature research that complemented her own investigations while sharing values and perspectives that had been shaped by similar family traditions of independent inquiry and unconventional thinking. His grandfather Newt's legendary work in magical creature protection provided foundation for collaborative research that could accomplish far more than either of them might achieve working separately. Their courtship was conducted through shared expeditions to investigate phenomena that required both of their specialties, as Luna's theoretical insights and enhanced perception combined with Rolf's practical field experience and family connections to create research partnership that revolutionized understanding of magical creature, behavior, and human-creature interaction in wild environments. The romantic relationship that developed alongside their professional collaboration was based on mutual respect and genuine affection, rather than mere convenience or social expectations. The wedding ceremony that united them became celebration of unconventional approaches to both love and academic inquiry, As Luna's insistence on wearing rainbow spangles and silver unicorn horn tiara reflected her commitment to remaining authentically herself, even when participating in traditional social rituals that might have pressured others to conform to more conventional expectations. Rita Skeeter's description of Rolf's shocked expression missed the deeper truth. His surprise was delight rather than dismay, as he had fallen in love precisely because Luna approached everything in life with creativity and originality that made ordinary experiences extraordinary. The research collaborations that defined their marriage produced discoveries that neither of them could have achieved independently, as their different approaches to investigation and analysis created synergistic effects that yielded insights into magical creature psychology and behavior that revolutionized protective legislation and conservation practices throughout the international magical community. Their work demonstrated that academic partnerships based on mutual respect and shared curiosity could be more productive than competitive relationships that sought to establish individual superiority rather than collaborative understanding. The twins, Lorcan and Lysander, who were born from their union, inherited both parents' fascination with magical phenomena and unconventional approaches to understanding the world around them. But they also developed their own unique perspectives that reflected the security and encouragement that came from being raised by people who valued curiosity over conformity and originality over social acceptance. Luna's approach to motherhood emphasized the same principles that had guided her father's child-rearing methods, providing love and support, while encouraging independent thinking and authentic self-expression. The bedtime stories she told her sons featured creatures and adventures drawn from her research expeditions, but transformed into tales that emphasized courage, kindness, and the importance of remaining open to possibilities that others might dismiss as impossible or irrelevant. The dragons that breathed ice instead of fire, the invisible creatures that taught lessons about loss and acceptance, and the mysterious beings that existed partially in other dimensions became part of family mythology that prepared Lorcan and Lysander for lives of discovery and wonder. The acceptance that finally came regarding the crumplehorn snorkack represented one of Luna's most difficult professional and personal adjustments, as years of searching had failed to produce evidence of creatures that had been central to her childhood fantasies and her father's theoretical investigations. The realization that some phenomena might exist only in imagination, rather than physical reality, required acknowledgement that even the most dedicated and sophisticated research methods had limitations that could not be overcome through persistence or innovative techniques. But this acceptance brought its own form of wisdom, as Luna learned to distinguish between productive investigation of genuinely unknown phenomena and futile pursuit of possibilities that might have no basis in objective reality, regardless of how much emotional investment they had received over years of hope and speculation. The skill of knowing when to continue searching and when to redirect energy toward more promising investigations became an essential element of mature research methodology that enhanced rather than diminished her effectiveness as magical naturalist. The legacy of her research work extended far beyond individual discoveries to encompass transformation of magical creature studies from static cataloging to dynamic investigation of ongoing evolutionary and adaptive processes that were reshaping magical ecosystems in response to changing environmental conditions and human activities. Her methods and insights became standard curriculum in magical naturalist training programs throughout the world, ensuring that future researchers would approach their work with openness and creativity that conventional academic traditions had never encouraged. The conservation programs that grew from her research provided practical applications for theoretical discoveries, as understanding of creature behavior and ecological relationships enabled development of protection methods that were more effective than previous approaches that had relied primarily on separation and restriction rather than cooperation and integration. Luna's work demonstrated that human and creature interests could be harmonized through careful study and creative problem-solving, rather than assumed to be inherently conflicting. The international recognition that her career achievements earned included honors and awards that acknowledged not just individual discoveries, but broader contributions to magical knowledge and understanding that had implications extending far beyond creature research to encompass questions about the nature of reality and the methods most appropriate for investigating phenomena that existed at the boundaries of conventional scientific inquiry. Her acceptance speeches invariably emphasized the importance of maintaining wonder and curiosity throughout one's professional career, regardless of how much expertise and recognition one might accumulate. The teaching positions that she occasionally accepted at various magical institutions provided opportunities to share insights with younger researchers while learning from their questions and perspectives. As Luna discovered that education was most effective when it functioned as collaborative exploration rather than authoritative transmission of established knowledge from teacher to student. Her classroom methods reflected the same unconventional approaches that had characterized her research, encouraging students to question assumptions and investigate possibilities that mainstream curriculum might dismiss as irrelevant or impossible. The books that she eventually published for both professional and popular audiences made her research accessible to readers whose own interests might be served by understanding magical creature behavior and ecological relationships, while her children's books introduced young readers to concepts of wonder and acceptance that could shape their development into adults who valued diversity and appreciated beauty in unexpected forms. The illustrations that accompanied these publications were created through collaboration with artists who shared her vision of magical world as a place where impossible and wonderful things could coexist with ordinary daily life. The later years of her career were marked by gradual transition from active field research to advisory roles in conservation policy and research methodology, as Luna's accumulated expertise made her valuable consultant for governmental and institutional programs that sought to implement approaches based on understanding rather than control. Her influence on magical creature legislation and protection protocols ensured that future policies would reflect awareness of ecological complexity and creature psychology that previous approaches had ignored or misunderstood. But perhaps her most important contribution was demonstrating through personal example that it was possible to maintain authenticity and wonder throughout adult life, regardless of professional pressures or social expectations that might encourage conformity and conventional thinking. As Luna never allowed success or recognition to alter her essential commitment to seeing the world through eyes that remained open to possibilities that others might dismiss as impossible or irrelevant to serious consideration. The girl who had once been dismissed as loony Lovegood by classmates who couldn't understand her unique perspective had evolved into a woman whose insights and discoveries had transformed entire fields of magical knowledge, while inspiring others to approach their own work and relationships with creativity and openness that made ordinary experiences extraordinary. The foundation that her parents had provided through unconventional education and unlimited support had proven capable of sustaining career and personal life that exceeded anything conventional paths might have made possible. The legacy that she was building through research, teaching, and family life demonstrated that difference was not just acceptable but valuable when it was expressed through dedication to understanding and helping others, that authenticity could coexist with professional success, And that wonder was not childish quality to be outgrown, but adult capacity to be cultivated throughout life, regardless of how much knowledge and experience one might accumulate along the way. The decades that followed Luna Lovegood's emergence as one of the magical world's most respected naturalists were marked by transformations that extended far beyond her individual achievements to encompass fundamental changes in how magical society understood the value of difference and the importance of perspectives that challenged conventional wisdom about what was possible and what deserved serious consideration. Her influence rippled through institutions and relationships in ways that she had never intended or anticipated, creating legacy that was measured not just in species discovered or conservation programs established, but in lives touched by example of authenticity and wonder that refused to be diminished by social pressure or professional expectation. The decision by Harry Potter and Ginny Weasley to name their daughter Luna represented recognition that went deeper than simple friendship or gratitude for wartime service, as they understood that the qualities Luna had demonstrated throughout their shared experiences were exactly what they hoped their child would develop during her own journey through magical world that would present challenges and opportunities that required strength of character rather than mere magical ability or social connections. The name carried weight of expectation and blessing, acknowledgement that authenticity and courage were gifts that parents could offer through example and encouragement rather than direct instruction. Young Lily Luna Potter grew up hearing stories about her namesake that emphasized not just heroic actions during dramatic moments, but daily choices to remain true to personal values, despite social pressure to conform to expectations that might compromise integrity or diminish capacity for wonder. The bedtime tales that Harry shared with his daughter featured Luna's ability to see beauty in creatures that others found disturbing, her willingness to believe in possibilities that conventional wisdom dismissed, and her commitment to friendship that transcended differences in background or personality. But perhaps the most important lesson that Lily Luna absorbed from these stories was understanding that being different was not burden to be endured but gift to be celebrated, that perspectives which challenged common assumptions could contribute insights that more conventional thinking would never achieve. The confidence that came from knowing she was named for someone who had transformed strangeness into strength provided foundation for psychological development that would serve her throughout life, regardless of what specific challenges or opportunities she might encounter. The influence that Luna's example had on Harry's own approach to parenting was evident in the way he encouraged all his children to question authority when questions were appropriate, to trust their instincts even when those instincts contradicted popular opinion, and to value authenticity over acceptance when the two came into conflict. His memories of Luna's unwavering support during his darkest moments had taught him that genuine friendship required willingness to stand by principles, even when such stands carried personal costs or social disadvantages. Hermione Granger's evolution from skeptical critic to admiring colleague reflected broader changes in how the magical academic community had learned to evaluate research methodologies and theoretical frameworks that did not conform to traditional approaches to knowledge acquisition and validation. Her initial dismissal of creatures like blibbering humdingers had been based on absence of documented evidence rather than closed-minded prejudice, but Luna's subsequent discoveries had taught her that absence of evidence was not equivalent to evidence of absence when dealing with phenomena that existed at margins of normal perception or in environments that conventional research methods could not access effectively. The collaboration that eventually developed between them on projects involving magical creature intelligence and communication patterns represented synthesis of approaches that had once seemed incompatible, as Hermione's rigorous analytical methods combined with Luna's intuitive insights to produce research that was both methodologically sound and creatively innovative. Their joint publications became required reading for students who wanted to understand how different intellectual traditions could enrich each other rather than competing for supremacy in academic hierarchies. The respect that Ron Weasley had gradually developed for Luna's unique perspective influenced his own career in ways that were subtle but significant, as his work with George in developing magical products for Weasley's Wizard Wheezes incorporated appreciation for wonder and whimsy that Luna's friendship had helped him recognize as valuable rather than merely frivolous. The joke products that they created often included elements that served practical protective functions while maintaining entertainment value, reflecting understanding that laughter and security could coexist in ways that purely serious approaches to problem solving might never achieve. His memories of Luna's ability to find hope and meaning in circumstances that would have discouraged others became source of strength during his own difficult periods. When grief over Fred's death threatened to overwhelm his capacity for joy or optimism about future possibilities, the lessons she had taught through example about processing loss, without allowing it to define one's entire relationship with life, provided practical guidance that formal counseling or well-meaning advice from friends could never have duplicated. Neville Longbottom's transformation into confident teacher and respected botanist was influenced by Luna's example of how apparent weaknesses could become sources of strength when approached with patience and understanding rather than shame or defensiveness about characteristics that set one apart from peer expectations. Her willingness to embrace qualities that others found strange had taught him that authenticity was more valuable than approval, that individual differences could contribute to collective wisdom in ways that conformity could never achieve. The students who learned from Professor Longbottom absorbed not just knowledge about magical plants, but broader lessons about resilience and growth that drew upon insights Luna had shared during their years of friendship and collaboration. In resistance activities, his classroom became a place where struggling students could find encouragement and support that was based on understanding that everyone developed at different rates and in different ways, that late blooming was still blooming, and deserved celebration rather than criticism. The impact that Luna's approach to friendship had on her former classmates was evident in the ways they maintained connections that transcended geographical distance and professional differences, as they continued to gather for celebrations and support during difficult times with loyalty that was based on shared values rather than mere nostalgic attachment to school memories. The bonds forged during their years of danger and discovery had proven durable enough to survive the transitions that marked adult life, creating chosen family that provided emotional resources that biological relationships could not always supply. The influence that extended beyond her immediate circle of friends included countless individuals who had encountered her work through publications, lectures, or conservation programs that reflected her approaches to understanding and protecting magical creatures whose existence depended on human willingness to coexist rather than dominate or exploit. The research methods she had pioneered were being applied by investigators throughout the world who found that openness to possibility, combined with rigorous observation, could yield discoveries that conventional approaches missed entirely. The magical creature sanctuaries that incorporated her insights into their protection protocols reported success rates that exceeded anything previous conservation efforts had achieved, as understanding of creature psychology and environmental needs led to strategies that worked with natural behaviors rather than attempting to impose human expectations about how protected species should respond to assistance efforts. Her work had demonstrated that effective conservation required humility and patience, rather than assumption that human knowledge was superior to creature wisdom about survival and adaptation. The legislation that grew from her research provided legal frameworks for protecting species whose existence had previously been dismissed as folklore, or whose behaviors had been misunderstood as harmful when they were actually essential for maintaining magical ecosystem balance. The Nagal Protection Act, which established guidelines for coexistence between human communities and creatures whose recycling activities were necessary for environmental health, became model for similar legislation throughout the international magical community. The educational programs that incorporated her research into curriculum for young witches and wizards emphasized respect for diversity in all its forms, teaching students that difference was resource rather than problem, when approached with curiosity and compassion instead of fear or prejudice. The textbooks that featured her discoveries presented magical creatures not as exotic curiosities, but as complex beings whose lives and behaviors could teach humans important lessons about adaptation, cooperation, and finding beauty in unexpected places. The impact on magical medicine was equally significant, as her identification of previously unknown magical parasites and her development of treatment methods had saved countless lives while advancing understanding of how magical and biological systems interacted in ways that conventional healing practices had never considered. The diagnostic techniques she had created for identifying Raxbird infestations became standard medical procedures that prevented misdiagnoses and ineffective treatments that had plagued magical healthcare for centuries. The theoretical implications of her work extended beyond creature research to encompass broader questions about consciousness, communication, and the nature of intelligence itself, as her documentation of creature behaviors and social structures challenged assumptions about what forms awareness could take and how different types of consciousness might interact with each other and with environments that included multiple species with competing needs and complementary abilities. The philosophical discussions that her discoveries generated in academic circles reflected fundamental shifts in how magical scholars approached questions about reality and perception, as her consistent ability to document phenomena that others had dismissed as impossible forced reconsideration of research methodologies and theoretical frameworks that might have been limiting investigation rather than enhancing it. The debates were intellectually stimulating but also practically important, as they influenced funding decisions and research priorities that shaped future investigation programs. The international recognition that her career achievements earned established Luna as a figure whose influence extended far beyond her specialized field, to encompass broader questions about how societies could better support individuals whose contributions might not fit conventional categories of value or success. The honors and awards she received were accompanied by speaking opportunities that allowed her to share insights about maintaining authenticity while pursuing professional goals in environments that might reward conformity over creativity. The lecture tours that took her to magical institutions throughout the world provided opportunities to meet young researchers who were inspired by her example to pursue investigations that conventional advisors might have discouraged as too risky or too strange for serious academic consideration. Her encouragement of these students to trust their instincts and follow their curiosity regardless of professional pressures created new generation of investigators whose work would continue expanding boundaries of magical knowledge and understanding. The mentorship relationships that developed from these encounters were characterized by mutual learning rather than hierarchical instruction, as Luna discovered that teaching was most effective when it functioned as collaborative exploration of questions that neither teacher nor student could answer independently. Her willingness to acknowledge limitations in her own knowledge while sharing insights gained through experience created educational environments where genuine discovery could occur rather than mere transmission of established information. The retirement from active field research that eventually became necessary due to physical limitations imposed by years of demanding travel and dangerous investigations was marked by transition to advisory roles that allowed her to continue contributing to conservation efforts while acknowledging that younger researchers needed opportunities to develop their own approaches to creature investigation and protection. Her willingness to step back while remaining available for consultation demonstrated wisdom about how knowledge and influence could be shared rather than hoarded or imposed on others. The family life that provided foundation for all her professional achievements reflected values and priorities that had been shaped by her unusual childhood and reinforced through years of friendship with people who shared her commitment to authenticity and mutual support. The home that she and Rolf created for their children was filled with books and artifacts from research expeditions, but it was also characterized by warmth and acceptance that encouraged individual development rather than pressure to conform to parental expectations or professional achievements. The bedtime stories that she continued to tell throughout her life, first to her own children and later to grandchildren and great-grandchildren, featured creatures and adventures that emphasized courage, kindness, and the importance of remaining open to possibilities that others might dismiss as impossible or irrelevant. These tales became family tradition that connected generations through shared appreciation for wonder and imagination as essential elements of meaningful existence. The legacy that Luna was consciously building through her various activities reflected understanding that influence was most positive when it was expressed through example rather than instruction, through encouragement of others' authentic development rather than attempts to create disciples or imitators who might diminish their own potential by trying to reproduce someone else's approach to life and work. Her greatest achievement was demonstrating that it was possible to remain true to oneself while contributing meaningfully to causes larger than personal satisfaction or professional recognition. The gardens that surrounded her eventual retirement home were filled with plants and features that attracted magical creatures whose protection had been her life's work, creating a living laboratory where she could continue observing and learning even when formal research expeditions were no longer possible. The space became a pilgrimage destination for researchers and conservationists who wanted to meet the woman whose work had transformed their understanding of magical creature behavior and human-creature relationships. The conversations that took place in this garden setting were characterized by same dreamy wisdom that had marked Luna's approach to every other aspect of life, as she shared insights with visitors while remaining genuinely interested in their own discoveries and perspectives. Her ability to make everyone feel heard and valued, regardless of their professional status or academic credentials, created atmosphere where meaningful exchange of ideas could occur without competitive pressure or hierarchical constraints. The writings that occupied her later years included memoirs and theoretical works that attempted to synthesize decades of field experience with broader questions about what it meant to live authentically in a world that often rewarded conformity over creativity. These publications became essential reading for anyone interested in understanding how individual difference could contribute to collective wisdom when it was expressed through dedication to understanding rather than desire for personal advancement or recognition. The correspondence that she maintained with researchers throughout the world created an informal network of investigators who shared approaches and discoveries in ways that advanced magical creature studies more effectively than formal academic conferences or institutional collaboration. Her letters were treasured by recipients not just for their professional insights, but for their warmth and encouragement that helped sustain careers in fields that could be isolating and discouraging for those whose work challenged conventional assumptions. The influence on magical creature legislation continued throughout her retirement years, as policymakers sought her advice on conservation programs and protection protocols that needed to balance creature welfare with human community needs in environments where both species had legitimate claims to resources and territory. Her recommendations were consistently based on understanding that sustainable solutions required cooperation rather than domination, that long-term success depended on recognizing the value and intelligence of all participants in shared ecosystems. The peace that characterized her final years reflected satisfaction that came not from worldly success or public recognition, but from knowledge that she had remained true to values instilled during childhood, while contributing meaningfully to causes that would continue benefiting others long after her individual involvement had ended. The authenticity that had once made her target for schoolyard bullying had ultimately proven to be her greatest strength and most valuable gift to a world that needed examples of courage and wonder. The friends who gathered to celebrate her life's achievements understood that they were honoring not just professional accomplishments, but demonstration of what was possible when someone refused to compromise essential aspects of their identity in pursuit of acceptance or approval from sources whose judgment was based on limited understanding of what truly mattered for meaningful existence. Her legacy was proof that difference was not obstacle to be overcome, but resource to be cultivated and shared for benefit of communities that were enriched by diversity of perspective and approach. The magical world that had been transformed by her contributions was a more compassionate and inclusive place, where creatures once dismissed as mythical or dangerous were recognized as complex beings deserving of respect and protection, where research methods that had been considered too unconventional for serious consideration were acknowledged as legitimate approaches to expanding knowledge and understanding, and where individual authenticity was valued as an essential element of collective wisdom, rather than threat to social harmony. The children who learned about Luna Lovegood through stories and educational materials that featured her life and work absorbed lessons about courage, kindness, and the importance of remaining true to oneself regardless of social pressure or professional expectations that might encourage conformity over creativity. Her example provided them with models for approaching their own lives with wonder and determination that would serve them well, regardless of what specific challenges or opportunities they might encounter during their own journeys of discovery and growth. The foundation that she had helped establish for supporting young researchers who wanted to pursue unconventional investigations continued providing grants and encouragement for projects that mainstream funding sources might have considered too risky or too strange for serious academic consideration. The criteria for awards emphasized creativity and authenticity rather than conformity to established research traditions, ensuring that future generations would have opportunities to expand boundaries of magical knowledge in ways that conventional approaches might never achieve. But perhaps most importantly, Luna Lovegood's life had demonstrated that it was possible to maintain wonder and authenticity throughout adult existence, that professional success could coexist with personal integrity, and that individual difference was not burden to be endured, but gift to be celebrated and shared with a world that was made richer and more beautiful by diversity of perspective and approach to understanding the magical possibilities that existed in every moment. For those who remained open to seeing them, rest now, young wizard, as our tale of Luna Lovegood draws to its gentle close. In the quiet darkness of this magical hour, Let yourself be comforted by the memory of a girl who taught the world that being different was not a flaw to be hidden, but a gift to be celebrated. That wonder was not childish foolishness, but adult wisdom of the highest order, and that friendship could transcend every boundary that small minds might construct to keep kindred spirits apart. As you drift toward dreams painted in silver and gold, remember that Luna's greatest magic was not found in spells or potions, but in her unwavering commitment to seeing beauty where others saw only strangeness, to finding hope where others discovered only loss, and to believing in impossible things that somehow became possible through the simple act of being believed in by someone brave enough to look beyond surface appearances to deeper truths. Sleep well, knowing that somewhere in the magical world, Nargles still redistribute lost objects according to their own mysterious wisdom. Thestrals carry those who have learned to see them through skies painted with starlight and possibility, and the painted ceiling of a dreamer's bedroom still spells out friendship in golden letters that shine with love that death itself cannot diminish. Sweet dreams, dear one, and may your own authentic magic illuminate whatever wonders await you in the morning light.